Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. I would like to explain what happens when you have a society that has a large, sprawling intelligence agency. For that, I am using now the organigram that I always use in my videos here. This is to represent society. We have, and now I should say, if we want to represent an entire nation state, we have to, in our minds, alter the organigram slightly. So in the case of a company, how I used this organigram before, it really meant power structures, so decision-making structures. So the person here would be a team leader making decisions for the people below. This would be a manager making decisions for entire teams, and that would be maybe the boss of the company. So I would like to use the same model to explain to you exactly the same effect, but this time I would like you to imagine that what you essentially have is, let's assume we have the perfect society, a wonderful, wonderful society whereby the people at the bottom listen to and are influenced by the people who can give them something that brings them further. In a sense, these could be thought leaders here, inventors who create technology that are then used by others, or entrepreneurs who found the company who other people essentially find jobs, or doctors who then heal people, and so on and so on. And the people want here are those people who help even more. Let's say this would be a doctor who maybe develops a new drug, who then passes it on to other doctors, who in turn pass it on to their patients, and so on. So I now want to take this as a model of a perfect society. Let's say today is day 0, and we're looking at a society in an imagined country that is perfectly stacked like that. In a pyramid organization, as long as this stacking is really immaculate, this is wonderful because you have the thought leaders, essentially passing it on, influencing others in a positive way, who then amplify it in turn, and so on. And you have the leaders all working to essentially help the thought leaders and help the people who drive the world or this country further. This is the idea. So this is how I mean this. It's not a strict organigram. The lines here, these blue lines, mean influence. These people have, the people up here have somehow some sort of power over others. They have a power over either through the ideas they spread or the policies that they make, and so on and so on and so on. So imagine that, duplicated for whatever aspect of our society you want. Okay, good. And I'm going to base now this entire discussion on a video that I made, which is about system inversions. So I encourage you, if you have the time, to please, before I continue, maybe watch or skim watch the video I made entitled Systems Analysis Basics and System Inversions, because there you find the other diagram that I made on this side here, and it's the same thing. It's essentially a mirror image of exactly the same organization, but here I have color-coded the different levels, and what I mean to show here is essentially the same society as here, but highlighted the amounts of skills that they have. So I would like the green to mean that these people have more skill than the people below. Okay, so these people are those who either don't influence anybody in turn, or who have very low skill, or very low motivation, or very low whatever. It's basically, in terms of our society, they are not really the driving engines, really. Or maybe you take the black to be also, oh, these are the members who are not very beneficial to our society either, take it however you like. But they are essentially the bottom tier in that sense. Now, in this ideal society, the good people manage to get to the place where they are, and their thought leaders in turn, or their leaders in turn, are even better than them. So I take this axis and these levels to mean skill, or the beneficial effect that they have on society. And then at the top I put, Mr. Golden Boy, who's absolutely amazing. In this dream society, the people at the top are brilliant, beautiful, intelligent, very productive, and generally just beneficial for society. Let's say as a model, okay? Good. So now let's assume we all know that our societies do not look like this, right? We all know that not the best people are, taking care of others, and not the best thought leaders are really the most beneficial people. We all know that. But let's assume we had a society that was this perfect. Now let's look at what would happen if, to a wonderfully efficient society like that, you would introduce a large intelligence agency that does exactly what these intelligence agencies are doing to us victims now. That means gang stalking, break-ins, damage to property, sabotage of electronic equipment, theft, modifying car radios, being shot at with microwave weapons, having miscellaneous harebrained human experimentation programs, hive mind teams, you name it, okay? Let's take all that and impose it now on this beautiful society. Let's start with the gang stalkers. Well, what the intelligence agencies are doing essentially with what they're doing to us, which is put us at the mercy of gang stalkers. You can figure that out by having a look at, if you're a victim, you know pretty much what I'm talking about. If you've never heard about this, let me tell you, when you're at the mercy of gang stalkers, the gang stalkers are essentially the national surveillance network of the intelligence agencies. They are everywhere, because they have to be. Because wherever somebody who's, for genuine reasons, under surveillance, wherever they go, there has to be people there who know the territory, who can follow him or her around and so on. But when you're an innocent victim like myself and thousands of other people, you are being not just followed around, you're also being harassed by these people, who we call gang stalkers, but who in actual fact are essentially the HUMINTEL, the human intelligence network of the intelligence agencies. This incorporates actual street stalkers, handlers, people who play street theatre, miscellaneous saboteurs, operatives, those who break into homes and cars, who've got the skills to modify car radios, for example, like in my case, who can shoot at you with electromagnetic weapons and that lot. Well, typically, if you're a victim, you have seen these people yourself and you can do an assessment of what their skill level actually is. If you have never seen them, just do a thought experiment and try to figure out yourself what sort of person would possibly be willing to be outside, walking up and down the street, stalking people, drive up and down the motorway in their car, stalking people, shoot at them with microwave weapons without ever asking any questions if this is right, if this isn't actually extrajudicial torture or mutilation, without asking any questions, and would do this day in, day out for pay. So you probably come up with the answer that that's not exactly the most beneficial parts of society who are doing it. So you will end up with the realization that the gang stalking network and those people who shoot at others in their home with electromagnetic weapons, and those people who do hive mind or whatever other fancy, neural dust and human experimentation, bullshitty projects on innocent people, by just grabbing them, taking their life apart, destroying them, and just for the sake of this experiment, those people are probably the dregs of society. If you don't know, just wait a couple of years and we will actually hopefully get a couple of those people in court. But anyway, so this is it. And what it actually means in system terms is that the intelligence agencies take the dregs of society and they place them above us, like that. So you might be, a researcher at Oxford like myself who worked really hard, doesn't matter, but some jerk will still be able to harass you every single time you leave the house, will modify your car radio, or someone else will, but there will be a group. So remember, every single one of these magnets could also be a group. It's like a tier. But that tier has been placed above the productive layers. Now, I was also an entrepreneur, and there are many other entrepreneurs, and my business, my startup, has been essentially ground to dust by incessant infiltration, mocking, by set-up meetings, by infiltrating meetings I attended to frustrate me, to mock me, and yada yada. I have that from personal experience, but there are other entrepreneurs who should be here because they're just starting, and maybe one day they would have been the next, business leaders in the country. But instead, what the intelligence agencies are doing is take those entrepreneurs and place them down here. And it goes on and on and on. We now know about doctors who really would love to just actually help some of these idiots when they become ill and would even be willing to do that. But instead, what the intelligence agencies are doing is take them, harass them. Maybe if they don't want to play along with human experimentation in the hospital, they get pushed down, they get abrased, they get sacked, they are turned destitute. Some of them are irradiated, made to have cancer, made to die of cancer, and so on. And it goes on and on and on, because you also have reports of lawyers to whom the same thing happened, and other professions. So bit by bit, the intelligence agencies are taking the productive assets we have. And by the way, I just mentioned the professions for the sake of the argument, simply because an entrepreneur would have had the opportunity to create a team. If you are unemployed, or if you're a single mom and you're raising children, do not believe I consider you here dregs of society just because you're not one of the professionals. No. That's not what I mean. If you're raising a child, you are obviously raising a child, right? You are a benefit to society, right? And it goes on and on and on like that, right? So that's not what I mean. Also, when you're unemployed, it doesn't mean you don't have to be in work to be a valuable contribution to society, because you're still interacting, even if you don't have a job. Even if you don't have a job and you're disabled, you are still having a beneficial influence on society, because remember, I'm talking about this in terms of influence. You still influence others. Your integrity places you still a tier up. So when in actual fact some idiot is promoted above you and you're then pushed down so that you're even more ill, you have even more problems, and so on, then this system inversion has already occurred, right? So I do not mean a tiering according to like income or, job opportunities or some nonsense like that. That's not what I mean. I mean in terms of how beneficial are you to society. And you can be out of a job, you can be also alone, or, many other things, but you still have a beneficial effect on society. by helping others, by just interacting with others, spreading positive messages, by just being you yourself. You are a valuable person. And if you have high integrity, then you're essentially the glue that holds society together. You know, through your many interactions, you know, you are holding society together. And that's why I always say that our society is gluonic, being a particle physicist, because gluons are the ones who hold the nucleus together through their interactions. So we are all gluonic in that sense. But that's something for another topic, for another video. So just so that you understand what I mean here, I mean to say that the intelligence agencies take those who are literally harassing others without asking questions, or just doing absolutely dumb and nonsensical jobs like just stalking us. They are essentially the dregs of society, and they've been placed above us. But it gets worse than that, because the intelligence agencies don't just stop there. We now know that they also have infiltrated the newspapers. They told the newspapers what to write and what not to write, and so on and so on. Well, what that means in real terms is that, again, they have taken the real journalists who would have been, you know, maybe would become the editors or the leaders of a newspaper, but instead of them becoming the editors, they have placed one of their people there who's following orders from them. And then the journalist goes one, you know, bit down. Maybe he stays on that tier, but maybe he also, if he speaks up, he gets gang stalked and ends up down here, you know, and so on and so on. So this kind of degradation and pushing people down happened over and over. And it's not just the media that got infiltrated by the intelligence agencies. As we now, bit by bit, find out more and more, it's also medical care for a lot of people. So heads of hospitals must have been corrupted. Heads of police must have been corrupted because they haven't done anything about the microwave assaults, even though microwave weapons have been known about for absolutely decades. So the intelligence agencies, as it seems, have bit by bit infiltrated our society, so that by now, even the leaders of these institutions have been corrupted or infiltrated. Either way, they're not doing what they should be doing, they are doing what they're told, which is not really what they should be doing. So, what does this look like overall? Well, you place these people there, but what this means is that even an editor of a newspaper is not working as an editor anymore. He's essentially just working as a dumb mouthpiece of somebody else. Well, that's not being at this level, it's being several levels below. And what about the gang stalkers? Just because they have been given power over you doesn't mean that they suddenly gained, for example, the skills of a high-energy physicist, or that they gained the skills of a doctor or a lawyer, or that they can raise children and care for their upbringing, right? No, nothing. It just means they're still the same dregs of society, they've just been given power over you. But that doesn't make them any more skilled. So nothing in terms of their skill has changed. So if these are skill levels, then they're not here, even though they're above you, they are still wherever they are. Oops. Sorry. They are essentially, sorry, the magnets are very, very strong. Ooh, these are, I think, the strongest magnets I ever had. Sorry, let me just put them back up. So what we essentially have is, even though they have been given power over the victims, they are still the same dregs of society they always were. So that's already one step down, but it gets even worse than that, because the thought leaders, so-called, who are, you know, one tier up from them, here, well, they also do not really belong there, because what they're doing day to day is not really at that level. You know, a corrupted editor of a newspaper simply is just a corrupted editor of a newspaper who's just doing what he's told. Well, that's not on par with an entrepreneur who's developing a new company for the country. No, even that, it doesn't matter how big the pay is, it is still just behaving like the dregs of society in a very corrupt fashion. So in actual fact, this tier is also not up there, it's on this level, as you would expect from the color coding. Oh god, not again. So, these magnets are very strong, so it's actually astounding how much force I have to put on. So, there we are. This is what our society looks like. So that's what the system inversion looked like already in my previous video, but now in the case of the intelligence agencies, it's clear what has happened here. By infiltration, by sabotaging the normal functioning of society, by taking gang stalkers and placing them, giving them power over us professionals and over us people of high integrity and hardworking single mothers and, you know, unemployed people trying to get a job and actually contributing to society, what they've actually done is actually even worse, because these people who are on this level, just being essentially just normal people, but just not very skilled and not very clever and not having very high integrity, they made them even worse, because the intelligence agencies have activated them and made them actively do criminal acts. Well, that's even a level down from just being an unskilled person, right? It's being an actual criminal, which is one layer down. And by placing the victims at the mercy of criminals, what you actually have, this is now not skill, but this is effective, what can you contribute to society? You have got high skills and you have you know, high integrity, and you could contribute a lot of things, but you can't, because instead you're dealing every day with the non-stop criminality of these abject morons. So in actual real performance, you have been pushed into essentially the basement here. So this is now a system inversion on a national level, thanks to the intelligence agencies. And what does that look like? Well, here on this level, the leadership of our country, or be that the leadership of the intelligence agencies, is still up there, right? But now there is a huge drop, right? Instead of these advisors being actually on this level genuinely and advising these people at the top properly, they are a bunch of idiots. And the actual advice these people get, or interaction or even information, is from down here. So it is essentially on level with the bottom of society. That's what happened. So by doing that, you can still be the leader of the empire if you like, but what you essentially have down here is just bullshit. And this is why this formation is what I call the empire of bullshit, right? This is the empire of bullshit formation. This entire thing here, right? That's what it is. It has to be, right? Because it is just a rule of system physics that this is going to happen. If you promote unskilled people above your skilled people, of course you're going to degrade your society. There's another way to make this bleeding obvious, right? I mean, people pointed out that these diagrams are very simple. Yes, I know that they're simple. This is not the best thing I can do. This is what I need to tell people because these are the mistakes that we're doing in our society, right? Yes, it just shows you how simple this is, and yet we've done that. So, for example, when you have news reports, like in The Guardian and many other British newspapers, about the budget of MI5 doubling after 2003 and their headcount tripling, you should think, hang on a second, these processes come about through infiltration, through expanding the stalking network, right? And if you expand an organization so rapidly to such a vast scale, you have very little control about the quality of your personnel plummets. It must do, because there are not that many absolutely outstanding people out there, would be great at the job. So what you have done is essentially just, recruited every Tom, Dick and Harry, right? And of course your quality is going to drop. But also keep in mind, as I explained in my other video called Deprogramming from Brainwash, that if you have the intelligence agencies, you essentially have sabotage agencies, because they're either through spying, sabotage other people's privacy, other people's economic endeavors, and so on and so on, right? That's the default. Yes, they might do something beneficial, but frankly, more and more these days, you figure out that that's actually a very small fraction of their day-to-day work. Bottom line is, spying is essentially sabotaging privacy, sabotaging things. So that's one thing. The other thing is a secret service. Anything that's secret, as I try to explain with the other systems talks about capture and psychopaths, right? A secret organization will always be vulnerable and in the end succumb to capture through criminal elements or through psychopaths. So a secret service sooner or later will become a criminal service. So when you have a secret intelligence service, what you have is a criminal sabotage service. Invariably. You can try as hard as you like, you can go on until you're blue in the face that that's not going to happen, but because you're just one person and you can't really control this huge organization around you, that's what's going to happen according to the laws of system physics. That's just what's bound to happen. It doesn't matter how great you are. And that's exactly here as well. Here, I even granted the leaders of this society true golden boy status. These people are beautiful and intelligent and everything. Nevertheless, their society is going to the dogs, and fast. And that's invariably going to happen. Okay, right? Now the other thing that's happening here is that the people who are the leaders, even though the society is breaking, and in fact, due to human factors, the more society is collapsing, the harder the people here who would like to keep their nominally high positions up here are going to do their absolute utmost to appear like they're on par, so they will suck knowledge and input from below, from the productive people here. This could be by stealing intellectual property from inventors and passing them off as their own, or it could be by sabotaging their competitors so that their business endeavors look more promising and so on, and they really look like genuine business leaders, but in actual fact they're just saboteurs, sabotaging everybody else and keeping everybody else's business down. So these people will try to pretend that they're up here, and also they will spare no costs. By the way, the money is usually extracted from down here, but they will spare no costs to create an illusion, and a really thick illusion, around these leaders here. And essentially they will try to put up what's generally called Potemkin villages and false facades of absolute glory, pomp and circumstance, right? So the leaders, especially in the empire of bullshit, will be surrounded by these golden cages, wonderful mansions, chateaus, you know, planes, jet-setting lifestyle, everything's beautiful, just beautiful people around them, and so on and so on. And you can check that this is invariably happening by just looking at the history books. What happened to, you know, big empires, the leaders of empires. Look at what happened to dictatorships everywhere around the world, and so on and so on. You know, there are plenty of examples that that's exactly going to happen, but the leaders will not realize that that's just an illusion, and actually, behind this facade, there's a big drop down to the absolute dregs of society, and the people who would have been here have been depleted. Now, of course, in an actual real society, you know, this top tier doesn't just consist of 2 people. It could be just thousands and thousands of leaders in your country. Some people are still genuine leaders, but others have been pushed down. So it will be a lot more asymmetric and varying in a real society, but the overall effect will be the same thing. Overall, society has been degraded, because even if you're one genuinely, you know, genuine business leader, if all your competitors around you, other genuine, you know, hardworking and intelligent business leaders have been depleted, then you will have a hard time essentially coming up with, you know, or talking up against all the idiots around you in the business sector, right? So that's invariably going to happen. So you will be dragged down to this level, whatever. So that is the empire of bullshit. I would like to stop here, and in the next video I'll explain what to do to actually fight the empire of bullshit. Thank you for listening, and bye for now. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. So in my previous video I explained how the empire of bullshit comes about by just infiltration by the intelligence agencies, and now I would like to put it more concretely about what the empire of bullshit looks like in real terms, and I apologize in advance for the language. I just can't help but get extremely frustrated. So the situation that we have now is that people like myself and like many other engineers, entrepreneurs, doctors, single moms, and many other people are essentially pushed down through the actions of the intelligence agencies by interposing a layer of gang stalkers and harassment personnel that push us down, by putting us way essentially below these criminals and other criminals who basically run human experimentation programs, but also by the courts who have been infiltrated by the police, heads of police and police officers who have been infiltrated by the intelligence agencies are essentially not acting the way they should. So the situation that has arisen, for example, in my case, is that in 2011, when I was up here, I was, so this I always call the bottom layer of society, so essentially people who are uneducated, unskilled, unmotivated, and don't have very much integrity. So I certainly was a layer above that. I was a fellow at Oxford, and then after that I was trying to start a company, but then what happened is that I was essentially pulled down by having a layer of gang stalkers interposed. I was harassed, I was stalked everywhere, my private and intimate life was commented on. I had essentially 24-hour surveillance non-stop since November 2011. I saw a bunch of old guys basically sexually titillate themselves with voyeuristic, essentially perving and stalking and harassment and putting on stupid little shows and all that for an entire year in Oxford. I had break-ins into my home, or one break-in into my home, then Oxford in 2012. Then this entire thing followed me to Germany. Then I tried to start a company. I was already kind of like, I couldn't really do the things that I would have been able to do it if people left me at my level. So I was trying to bootstrap the company from literally bottom up and try to push up. But instead of allowing me to make that transition and actually pull this off, instead I was pushed down even further. Essentially, I was frustrated. I spent an entire, I think, a year and a half in Germany trying to bootstrap this company. I had police officers try to intimidate me at business meetings. There was the police officer Elisabeth Sombruch, for example, from the Munich art department, who magically appeared at the, I think it was the meetup for female entrepreneurs in science and technology. So she infiltrated that meeting with another agent. The other agent followed me to other meetings like the Lean Startup, harassed me. These people, I mean, especially the other agent, they are so incredibly thick, I can't actually put it across to you. They are essentially the bottom layer of society. So when they're stalking you and trying to infiltrate, it's obvious. So you essentially notice it frustrates you, you get disconcerted, you can't do your work, and bit by bit, essentially the German intelligence agencies managed to pull me down even further than the British intelligence agencies. Then they started pushing me down even further by infiltrating my medical care, by harassing me. Then I started being irradiated, so my health was diminished. When I returned to the UK, I was shot into the neck with electromagnetic weapons. Then, here in Switzerland, there was a second break-in, demonstrative breaking into the home. I started being irradiated even harder when I said that I'm going to report that to the police. My family started being attacked, that already in Germany. My friends started being attacked, and by now, I am irradiated non-stop. And as I'm giving this talk here, one of the things that you cannot see is essentially that I am being irradiated, which causes me a non-stop headache. So if I put my hands close to my head, I can feel roughly there, about somewhere there, and I think somewhere there, another beam. And these beams essentially track me around. So one is coming from a neighbor somewhere down there, and another beam is coming from the side and is impinging on my head. And these two beams essentially cross over inside my head. So this is now the empire of bullshit in the year 2011. Already 2016 I was irradiated non-stop. I was mutilated. I am being mutilated inside my home in Switzerland. When I tried to flee to Germany, I was mutilated even harder, stalked even harder, mocked by German intelligence. When I went back to the UK, I was irradiated again, very brutally to the head. Here, when I was trying to talk to the police, to the German ambassador, asking for help, they all rejected any sort of assistance. The police, the criminal police in Switzerland, the Attorney General in the UK, the police in the UK, the police in Germany, the federal police, and so on and so on and so on. In the end, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal in the UK rejected any assistance, and in the end, the High Court. So now I have tried it all, and basically I have been pushed down. And what we're now looking at, I've just briefly summarized what has happened to me, because that is essentially typical. It is typical for the people who have been pushed down, basically way below their status. So in a sense, all these victims should be here or up here by now, but instead they're literally lower than the bottom of society because they are also exposed to a criminal element, and they are being medically mutilated. Essentially, their physiological integrity is being mutilated, their business endeavors are actively being destroyed by essentially people who are the absolute dregs of society and one criminal layer below that. So we are at the mercy of them, we are down here. So by the time this happened in a society, and it seems to have happened in all Western nations, in every single one, I have cases of essentially irradiation with these microwave weapons from Poland, Japan, I know people from France, Belgium, the UK, US, lots, right? Here I am in Switzerland, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Basically, there doesn't seem to be a country that is not in this empire of bullshit at the moment, thanks to the intelligence agencies. So what we now have essentially is entirely because of the sabotage, the societal sabotage, infiltration and general degradation by the intelligence agencies. They have managed to, as far as I can tell, single-handedly destroy our societies through that. When I went public, after that I went public in early December, December 2016, I received so many desperate pleas for help, stories, absolutely horrific stories, how, you know, a single mother of an autistic child is being attacked, the autistic child is being attacked as well. Anybody who's a child with autism knows how hard life is already. And then you have a bunch of essentially degenerate morons and weaponized idiots, and, you know, impinging on your life. And meanwhile, you have, you know, police officers and judges and lawyers refusing to help. So that essentially puts them into the dregs of society as well. They are also utter scum by just rejecting help. So this is now the situation we're dealing with. I, like many other victims, am being shot into. I had my body shot into, especially my head shot into last night. I woke up with my head being absolutely cooked at full blast with microwave beams that pass through walls. And this is essentially happening to thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in our Western societies. And the question is, how could it have come to this? Well, it came to this simply because of the infiltration action by the intelligence agencies, and I tried to explain that in the previous video. The question is now, once we're in this empire of bullshit, which I think you agree this is what this is, what are we going to do about it? And this is what I would like to talk to you about in this video. So the problem we're dealing with is that people like me and other professionals and single mothers and so on are being attacked in the most brutal fashion. I personally tried to approach all sorts of charities, the big human rights charities. All of them knew about these cases, none of them were willing to help. And that's the outrageous thing. Every single place I called, they had already heard about attacks with electromagnetic weapons and microwave weapons, yet they refused to do anything about that. And for me personally, that's already essentially guilty by association. Or, you know, there's a crime that's ongoing. Certainly in Germany, I learned at school that this is already a criminal offense. If you know that there's a crime happening, and ongoing, in process, and you do not do anything about that, then you are yourself guilty by allowing that, knowingly, willingly allowing that to happen. Now, I myself have now tested with all the big human rights charities that this is the case. They actively refuse and have refused, presumably for absolutely years, if not decades, to actually help these people. You know, and now I'm a victim myself. The same is also true of the entirety of the mainstream press in the UK and in Germany. They all refuse to report about it. So essentially what we have now is that crimes against humanity are being committed. People are not safe in their own home anymore. And the press refuses to report about that. And also the human rights charities don't do anything. The police still tries to stamp us with mental health. This is utter bullshit. And it is bullshit simply because we now know that 70% of the victims are women. 70%. This has already been reported for the US in 2010. Since then, I have confirmed that by well, with the heads of two charities and two organizations that help victims. So they both confirmed, yes, as far as we can tell, the vast majority are women. Now, that is not national security, it's not even schizophrenia or paranoia, which is what most people are being smeared with, because schizophrenia and paranoia are predominantly male. So that's 60% male diseases, so the sufferers are 60% male. In contrast, we have 70% female victims. That looks much more like sexual violence and essentially war crimes. And this is precisely what you would expect in the empire of bullshit, where utter, corrupt, degenerates and psychopaths have been placed, empowered above productive people. Now, what we essentially have is the total collapse of our society. And and we should also remember that, you know, as we're in the state now, in practice, what we have is essentially Chinese and Russian intelligence watching us, absolutely, utterly laughing themselves to bits over this, because this is hilarious. We essentially have our renowned intelligence agencies in Germany and big MI5 and MI6 essentially single-handedly driving the country into the ground. There's no other way to put it. Or when you actually meet the victims and actually find out who these people are, they are always people of high integrity. Always. Because they have to be. Because the people who don't have high integrity are the perpetrators, right? So this is what's happening. This is an absolutely dreadful state, but now the question is, what are we going to do about this, essentially? So this was just a brief description for those who you know, are new to the topic and wonder what on earth this is about. We have essentially psychopaths and criminals running a bunch of degenerate, weaponized morons down here who are harassing people non-stop. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? This is essentially it, right? And meanwhile, we've got some leaders up there, so-called leaders, could be anything. Well, these are not like angel wings, although I'm sure that they think, ooh, they're just flying towards, you know, the heavens in their absolute amazingness. But in the meantime, there's this big drop. This is around them. These are essentially Potemkin villages, a facade of just, you know, pomp and circumstance. And meanwhile, there's this sharp drop down to where society overall actually is. The same is also happening in businesses. You have the business leaders who think, oh, they run these amazing organizations. And the top tier of management, which by that time is already infested with utter idiots and corrupt psychopaths, you know, they pretend, oh yes, we're so amazing, we're up here. They create this facade of, you know, modified numbers, yes, share price, and ooh, it's all amazing. And in real terms, the company is already, you know, bottom, at the, you know, at the bottom end of things. And meanwhile, you have these people living in their own little bubble that was created by other people. So the question is, how the hell to break out of this? And I spent now, you know, over 10 minutes repeating all this, because this is what you have to be aware of. This is what we're dealing with. We now have a situation in the Western world where people are shot to bits with microwave weapons inside their own home. Some of them have implants, some of them have been infected with certain viruses that are tested on them. They are literally being mutilated to death in their own home. And meanwhile, the police and other organizations don't do anything. They're incredibly corrupt. You just can't get through, and it looks like everything is lost. And as we speak, this is sliding lower and lower, because these people are essentially attacking more and more and more people. You know, they start attacking judges who are trying to speak out, lawyers, and it just goes on and on and on and on like that. So what are we going to do about it? Here it is. This is now the plan. So you have to realize what this is based on. You know, first of all, where do we want to be? Well, we have to be, you know, we have to take these people who all have been attacked, and I would take all attacked individuals, all of them, right? And essentially realize that the system, this corrupt system, for us has already identified the people of high integrity. They have done the work for us. So what I would do is take these people individually and place them back where they belong, which is up here and above these morons, whoever they are. This could be placing a person, if this is now a corrupt judge, or this is a corrupt editor of a newspaper, right? Their income might be higher, you know, it might be up here at this level, but their, you know, mental capabilities and their integrity and the actual performance, you know, for society is here way below. It's in essentially the dregs of society. So if you've got an editor of a newspaper who's essentially just printing propaganda and preventing actual crimes against humanity, which are ongoing in his country, from being reported, well, you can't think that he's up here. He's in the dregs of society. So what you have to do is take the victims and place them back above these people where they belong, and do it with absolutely everybody, right? How do you do this? How do you get them back? Well, first of all, you have to restore their finances. You have to restore their finances, number one. The way I would do it is to open crowdfunding For every single victim has to have a personal crowdfunding website, and the community has to make sure that the crowdfunding website actually attracts enough funding. We have to start with that. Their finances need to be restored. Second of all, their reputation needs to be restored, and not just restored to just, oh, nobody level. No, they have to be recognized for who they are, which is essentially abuse victims who have borne the abuse, the human experimentation, in some cases for decades. Now that essentially is like, in terms of achievement, on par with the Navy SEALs, right? Because you have been tortured and you haven't, if you're still alive, you haven't cracked, you haven't killed yourself. You couldn't be killed off, despite their best attempts. So what this means is you are truly an amazing person. So you're not on par with a corrupt editor of a mainstream newspaper. You are above them. And if you manage to do something alongside of your targeting, you are way above them. These people just got high salaries and printed crap in their newspapers. Well, that's not hard, right? But you did something amazing. So you have to be restored. So I would say point number one, crowdfunding websites. And we now start an actual process of restoring their finances and giving people back the income. So we will do that. We'll do this in a transparent way, and we'll make sure, we have to make sure that these people get restored, because they spent a lifetime of hell. Right? They have to be restored, and they have to be compensated, and the compensation has to come from the courts. So what we have to do is essentially cycle back the system and force these corrupt judges to actually do their job as it's required. We have to force them back up out of their corruption, and we have to recapture them and turn them into honest people. So we have to essentially restore society, right? And that's actually not as hard as you think, because if you kick out a corrupt judge and you replace him with someone of integrity, that is instantly bouncing somebody back up. So it can go, literally, it can go with one sacking and replacing it with someone with integrity. There's another way to do it. If you keep this person and you have the entire world watching that court case and making absolutely sure that that judge understands that if his judgment is going to be rubbish, that he will pay the price for the rest of his life. Every future promotion will be mired by the knowledge that in a case of crimes against humanity, he wasn't willing to actually do justice to the victim, right? So you can also force a corrupt person to act with integrity, which is almost like having somebody with integrity, right, back up by essentially forcing them to act with integrity. Okay, so now I'm giving you the actual general outline of what we're going to do. Okay, the other thing is also that some people are physically damaged, right? They have cancer as a result of the weapons and so on, many other horrific injuries. Their social circle has suffered. We have to restore everybody in every other way, also in terms of their reputation and in terms of their regard in society. We have to bring them back up to where they belonged, and then beyond that to where they belong now by having endured that without flipping, because most people in society couldn't do that. So this is the plan, and for that we have to know who the victims are. If a victim just continues suffering in silence down here, we'll never know about them. If they never open a crowdfunding website, we can never restore their finances, right? If they never join a court case, they can never be compensated by a court. They'll always stay, and I mean, we have to clear out these stupid, criminal thugs as well, and we have to lock them up. But until we get there, until we get every last criminal thug harassing a victim, these victims have to come forward, because only when they become public can we actually lift them back up, back out of their misery. So this is what has to happen. And also people's health has to be restored. And the health is crucial. There are ways to cure cancer. There are ways to actually get back to health. There really are ways. And we know that a lot of the actual insight from medicine have been withheld. And that basically has to be stopped, right? We have to uncover all this. And we are, as mankind, we are actually ratcheting towards that, right? There's other ways to restore people to health as well. And a lot of it is also psychological, by just getting them out of these essentially individual concentration camps where the intelligence agencies have placed them, right? So that's one thing. But in terms of health, another really crucial aspect is also we have to force the intelligence agencies who have the files. They know what human experiment has been done on these people. They know what implants they have. They know what has been done. We need to force them to give these to the victims. Every victim has a right to know what has clandestinely, illegally been done to them. It's a crime against humanity with lasting consequences. The intelligence agencies absolutely steadfastly refused to cooperate, even when these crimes became public. By now we have this ridiculous state where we have literally thousands of people complaining on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on other social media about their targeting, and the intelligence agencies are so utterly degenerate, they still don't get it. They still don't stop. I don't know of any certified case where people have stopped the harassment. With people, I mean the intelligence agencies. I don't know of a single case. Now with that, already the intelligence agencies have gambled away any sort of trust or even regard we should have for them. That is truly an organization out of control. Now, an organization out of control does not have any rights. It does not operate within its statutory bounds anymore. And we know that the statutory bounds have been manipulated and distorted. But now we've got a situation where people are stuck in individual concentration camps inside their home. We know about it, it's public, a large fraction of what the implants are, how they can grow inside their bodies, how the microwave weapons work, what sort of brain, screwing, idiotic bullshit experiments are being run on them. Despite all this, the intelligence agencies continue. And my full public appeals to the heads of British and German intelligence are an evidence of that. They know I've got lots of evidence because they played out the Muppet Show in front of my eyes. Yet they are not willing to stop my targeting. Last night again I was cooked. Today, continuously I'm cooked. I can't actually use 2 rooms in my home because they have huge windows and I'm being irradiated from my neighbors. There's a beam, typically actually 2 beams overcrossing inside my head that follow me around the home. I know for a fact the last couple of months that these beams started. At first they were erratic as I was pacing up and down through my flat because the thickness of the walls was, varying as I was going along. But now a learning algorithm has essentially corrected that. So I've got the same headache that only slightly moves about as the beams correct in my head as I go from here to my kitchen and back. Right? But I can figure out how the technology works. It's not a rocket. I also have measurements up online showing, just over Christmas how German intelligence actually tried to cook my head, right? And how they have different beams impinging on my head. By the way, that little measuring device, the Acousticom 2, the EM Fields Acousticom, has been stolen from my flat just the last 2 days. So it was I think the day when I drove to have my car repaired in Germany. And I was even saying, oh, okay, now I'm driving. And, if an accident happens to me, please blame the German intelligence for that. Because it was in Germany I had my car repaired, and after that these problems started happening, interestingly. And then I go again to have my car repaired again. By the time I come back, this measuring device is gone from my flat. Now that's very interesting. Anyway, these things keep happening, right? So how are we going to go out of this empire of bullshit? Well, this is how we're going to do it. And the other thing is also, so this is now the overview, and in the next video I'll go into details and how exactly. I'll give you an actual breakdown of how on earth to come out of this. So this is number 1, but we're going to do another thing, which is something that you have to do, because what this essentially is, you saw, I am now rotating the system. All these people who are here, I'm rotating them back up. So what I'm essentially doing with this is a system cycle. We are cycling the system. We're putting the intelligent people back up to where they actually belong, and we're putting the dregs of society back to where they belong. And we put the criminals in our society where they belong, which is in jail, and the corrupt police officers just the same. And corrupt judges out, this is what we're doing. So this is a system cycle. But for system cycle to work, if this is what you do, and I explained in detail how we're going to restore the victims, we have to first of all remember that there are many more victims. Children have been trafficked. I've heard children are still in captivity from the trafficking, are kept essentially, I suspect, in underground facilities, in homes, kept locked up, exploited, sexually exploited, some of them also, I think, murdered. And horrific things are still ongoing because of this, essentially. The total corruption of our society as the empire of bullshit formed. Now, if you want to cycle out of the empire of bullshit, one of the things you have to do is do a system broadcast. And this means, unfortunately, that our newspapers are captured. So they're down here, they're the dregs of society, so they're useless. So we have to use any other means to achieve the system broadcast, because the fact that we're cycling the system has to reach every last corner of our society. That's when it works, because then people realize, oh my god, this criminality has happened. Once they know about the criminality, don't worry, rely on them helping you with the system cycle, because everybody hates corruption. Everybody hates criminality. Only 1% of our societies are psychopaths. Yes, people can be corrupted, but if they have an option to have, essentially an easier life and calmer life by not worrying about the fact when their corruption will be uncovered, people always go for the easiest thing. And actually a stable, safe society is a lot less stressful than one where there's non-stop crime, corruption, you can't rely on anything, backstabbing, psychopaths. That's a stressful world, and anybody who's ever lived in a third world country knows that this is pretty stressful. So if you have a choice of living in a third world country where your handbag can be stolen just as you go into your car, or anything, necklace might be ripped off your neck as you're literally just crossing 3 meters from your safe compound to your car parked on the street, these people know that this is not very safe. It's better to live in countries like Switzerland where, in some places you can still leave your door unlocked, and everything will be fine. So if people have a choice between living in non-stop stress in, gangsterland, and even gangsters, honestly, believe me, they would prefer just an easy life, right? So always worrying about having a bullet to the back of your head is also not the lifestyle that people really want to retire with. So in a sense, once we do a system cycle, everything will be better. Because in a sense, if you are, as the empire of bullshit is created, more and more stupid people fill the ranks, and the only way for our society is down, right? The people up here, the leaders, they might feel like, oh yeah, we're doing all these futuristic projects, we're going to Mars, and we're going like we're doing self-driving cars. Amazing. But the reality is, you have created the empire of bullshit, and whilst you are dreaming with your little crowd of cronies about, oh, how you're going to settle Mars, meanwhile, society is collapsing under you. Open brackets, another thing that's also an artifact of this, is that our ecosystems are collapsing around us, right? And that's because some of these business leaders were rather corrupt and poisoned the environment, and corrupt judges didn't really persecute these corrupt business leaders, so, you know, the toxins kept being pumped. And, oh yes, and other business leaders poisoned the employees, they started having cancer, and no, and this entire thing just dies. And it really is like flying a Boeing, and then suddenly it just goes into nosedive, right? The crazy person who essentially elbowed the pilot to one side and says, oh yeah, I'm so amazing, I'm just like, Mr. Global, I like it, I like, bullshit essentially, I like criminality and I like all these things, yeah. What you're doing is essentially turning your society into free fall, and this like sensation of just floating in air and everything is like amazing, that's an artifact of you essentially being in free fall. When you just look relative to the floor of the plane, it looks like you're freaking floating up into the sky, but you're actually not. You're not floating anywhere, you're nosediving down in free fall, and everything around you also goes at the same speed in free fall. It looks like you're floating in the air cabin and you might think you're the most amazing person, but in fact it is free fall, and that's what we're in now. The empire of bullshit is creating free fall for society. If you're the leader up there and you think you're amazing, you're an idiot. What you are is deluded by the Potemkin villagers and the facade, the corrupt cronies you hired put up around you. Yeah, your life could be amazing, but then please only say, I'm a psychopath living in a little bubble, and then you would be spot on. If you claim to be an amazing business leader, you haven't actually didn't go outside and look on the ground. My recommendation to you is dress up in disguise, pretend to be literally the lowest of the employees, and check out how your company really looks, right? Kings and other leaders in the past have done just that, to break out of this, essentially, the happy facade put up around you by your corrupt cronies. You have to break out and you have to see what it really looks like. And you have to be honest about it. And then you see how deep the drop is. So this is the empire of bullshit. Nosedive, right? In the moment when it's free fall and everybody starts floating, right? People can believe they are like so amazing. But really overall, you're not on solid ground. There is no traction. The plane doesn't actually, in overall terms, doesn't actually get you any higher. In contrast, if you keep promoting intelligent people who then also are altruistic and help the people below, either by spreading their knowledge or by creating companies that create jobs or by improving the environment or by just coming up with novel ways for clean energy and so on, and you allow a healthy system where information can spread freely, people are respected, even if you don't see their value, you respect them because you realize that actually a society is based on interactions. We are a gluonic society. So the interactions, they are the ones that count, and sometimes a person who's utterly uneducated can be inspiring to somebody who's highly educated, and vice versa, right? So if you allow all people, to be healthy and try to bring out the maximum in them, it doesn't matter if they're on this level, or that level, you try to get the maximum out of everybody, what you essentially create is an uplift, right? So that is the exact opposite. Here, you achieve free fall with the empire of bullshit. If you do the opposite, and you actually try to cycle to a better system, whereby people support each other, well, with altruism, essentially what you're creating is a society that climbs higher and higher, but the entire base climbs with you. So what you're doing is then you are a leader, right? And you have genuinely intelligent advisors, and below that you have a tier of genuinely, and a multitude of genuinely creative and entrepreneurs, genuinely creative scientists, and so on, right? And you keep the criminals, the actual criminals, as far down as you can, and the corrupt people and the psychopaths. Well, then you can't really drop down. All you can do is essentially move up together with everybody. So as everybody's moving up, so are you. So what you're creating is essentially a society with trend up. And even if one person should just drop off, right, someone else can take their place. But it doesn't really, there is no way for you to collapse down. So what the system cycle is about is not removing the leaders in the world. It is not about that. It's not about killing anybody. It's not about taking anybody's wealth away. Remember, because what you had in wealth was most of the time an illusion. Okay? A very, very small pool. It's like a speck. when we're talking about really serious wealth, it's not backed up by an actual engine, and it's the system that's the driving engine. If this engine is diving, sooner or later it will start pulling you as well. Because your investments are going down, because your military capabilities are going down, because your societal protections around you are going down. And then you're free fall. With this, you keep going up. And essentially the rules to follow for the system cycle are very easy. Very, very easy. And actually, you can start with, first of all, take the people who are now unjustly at the very bottom and put them back to where they are. Have them compensated. And by doing that, you already picked the hardiest people. Now, these people managed to survive under concentration camp conditions. So now just imagine what these people can do if you just let them go. It's like having a horse that has always been like held back in the races as far back as possible, and it still manages to keep up and still manages to run. Now just imagine what that horse can do if you let go. If you just let go and actually feed it properly. Because all these years of training, because this is essentially what it is for the victims of the intelligence agencies, it is essentially resilience training. To just get through your day, you essentially have to be a Navy SEAL, right? Every single day. You will be shot at, you'll be, essentially physically disintegrated, and you still have to continue. You have to deal with sleep deprivation. That's a war zone, right? You are in a freaking war zone. You're being shot at, for God's sake, non-stop, right? So this is it. This is what we have to do to pivot out of the empire of bullshit, and also it has to be a global pivot, because remember, this is happening all around the world. Now, you can't actually lift the system, because essentially if you forgive me saying so, the shit here is spreading into other countries. These intelligence agencies are international, they're interlinking with other agencies, being just as corrupt as they are. We have these roving hordes of mercenaries who are essentially trained in sabotage and so on and so on. So if you don't want that, you have to have a global cycle out of the empire of bullshit. A global pivot. And the pivot is actually surprisingly easy to do. It is literally sometimes as easy as just letting go the reins of a horse and just letting it run. So this is now the announcement of the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. This is the rough idea of what we're going to do. And remember, with these victims who have to be lifted back up, I do not just mean the victims of the intelligence agencies, as like I, for example, and others like me. I also mean the children who have been abused, but I also mean the people who are essentially the victims of financial terrorism. The people who lost their homes, who lost their jobs, who had all these horrific injustices due to fraud and crime done to them. We are now cycling the system, and we are going to essentially do it ourselves. And if you manage to get one level up, it is your duty to take somebody else and help them. Because through this, we're literally going to ratchet up bit by helping each other. So this is the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. In the second part, I'll explain in detail of how to do this. Thank you for listening, and please watch the second part to actually see my suggestion for the recipe. Thank you very much, and bye for now. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. This is the second part of the video entitled The Global Pivot Out of the Empire of Bullshit. And just to summarize, for those of you who just joined us and haven't seen the first part, I encourage you to first watch the first part. But in other terms, the summary is the following. I have made the point that right now, what we have in our Western society is essentially the establishment of the empire of bullshit, which is characterized by a complete corruption of society by the intelligence agencies who have infiltrated our press, the press that doesn't actually report about the crimes against humanity committed against citizens. There are also other corrupt doctors and heads of hospitals who are doing human experimentation. There are corrupt scientists who are essentially also working on these experiments. Corrupt arms dealers selling these microwave weapons with which people are assaulted in their homes. Corrupt handlers running gang stalking networks. All of these people essentially deriving wealth from the state, getting paid for corrupt acts. Meanwhile, genuinely productive people being pushed down and essentially have to live several layers below the dregs of society, under layer of criminals, and they're at the mercy of both of them. So when this happens to society, a society essentially enters nosedive. In the meantime, typically, the upper echelons, or the leaders, or the elites as sometimes they are called, live in a society like that. The leaders live in what I would call La La Land, essentially. This is characterized by very, very thick layers of illusion around them, pomp and circumstance, ostentatious wealth, a lifestyle that is entirely based on hedonism, not very much on hard work, and actually doing something genuinely for society. It's also characterized by runaway sort of philosophies that are entirely detached from tangible values, sometimes distorted and also deranged viewpoints more and more. And if you want to find examples of that, you could look at past examples of, for example, the communist system. I'm just looking around for a book that I had somewhere here. Yes, here it is. For example, Marxism and Communism. There's a very good book by Richard Wurmbrand, which is essentially Marx and Satan, and this is essentially about Satanism being, you know, yeah. And he's cracked what ideas about Satan and Satanism essentially infecting, you know, the upper echelons of the, you know, of the so-called communist revolution and so on, and the thought leaders. And this is happening over and over. Actually, the entire Satanist brand of, well, of essentially corrupting the leaders, enticing them in, is ancient. I mean, this is an ancient model. It's essentially a legacy system, and because it corrupts. Once you use corruption to conquer a nation, it is extremely fast. That's why, if you want to really conquer a nation, you corrupt its leaders, you degrade them. So that essentially what you're then doing is you're pushing one society down artificially, using the corruption and corruptibility of itself. So it's essentially like a system takedown, using the inertia of the own system. You know, by empowering one corrupt individual, who will then empower another one. And essentially with that, you can make a society crash. And then with another society, you can come in and take over. And you, of course, meanwhile, keep the highest level for your own society. So this is why, throughout the ages, corrupting another society, corrupting its military leaders and so on, and its thought leaders, its intellectuals, have always been a very good way of conquering things. However, and this is why, by the way, it's so persistent. I mean, you know, the Satanism and all this occult and this kind of, what it essentially is psychopaths trying to razzle-dazzle other people, and ideally other psychopaths as well, because controlling psychopaths is the most powerful thing you can do, because you're controlling ruthless individuals who are willing to do anything for you, just at the promise of more power and more money and so on. So throughout the ages, you know, psychopaths have cottoned onto this, and this sort of crushing a society to then come in with another one is an old tale. And it has been with us, it has been pulled off over and over and over by miscellaneous groups of networked psychopaths throughout the ages, and this is still being done today. So what's possibly wrong with it? Well, what's wrong with it now is, even though it has been historically a very successful business model, if you like, now the profitability of it is actually about to turn around, and turn around quite violently. And that's because by now the cartels we have, and the cartels who've typically done this, are now global. So if they pull another part of any part of the world down, they are essentially pulling themselves down. So what if they continue blindly, like a bunch of idiots, trying to do the same thing? What this means is they haven't actually understood their own reach and how they essentially have saturated. They have saturated the system. So this method has been used over thousands and thousands of years. You know, this group of godlike, deluded leaders where everybody else in society is essentially living in a criminal quagmire. This is not new. Now, again, in our Western society, over the last couple of decades, we have seen an actual plummeting, you know, down of our societies. After a brief boom after the Second World War, it's nosediving again. The idea being that maybe another country, maybe China, maybe other countries are moved in, who have, you know, higher standards, more educated people, and take us over here, and then who, you know, for the cartel holders, they think that will be such an amazing thing. Now, even though this has been an amazing business model, quite demonstrably so, in the past, now, what these people are not doing, are not realizing, is essentially because of their global reach, they are essentially devaluing. In a sense, they own both this bit and that bit. So by doing that, they haven't actually gained anything apart from just do a lot of bullshit. Just create an empire of bullshit to then repair it again. Instead, the clever idea would be the new business model, whereby you ideally don't crash the society. If you already have, like most of the Western world, you do a quick system cycle, bring these two up to be side by side, and then you start moving up both at the same time. Because what you then have is a global move up. And then the leaders who can stay wherever they are, they can stay. That's what they don't understand. They think, oh my God, this means a loss of power. No, you stay where you are. We're just cycling the system to get an actual coverage under your ass. Do you understand? So this is what we're dealing about. This is what we're dealing with, and this is what we're talking about. You already own this. You already own this. Why make this bit shitter if you can actually pull it up and then rise on both sides equally? Because the fact that we're collapsing here is already evidenced by the fact, if you look at how many new inventions, how many new revolutionary teaching methods, insights, authored books, amazing poems written, you know, anything, you name it, a typical, you know, creative output of a society, how many of those do we have? There has been a decrease. Even though the population is expanding, there has been a decrease in this. Why? Because people do not have the leisure time to author books and come up with new creative things that then would benefit the elite as well, because they typically are, you know, few people, so they can't generate as many different things to benefit from as the base can. And these people can't generate these books and inventions and so on because they're being gang stalked, they're being shot into with microwave weapons, they lost their home, they lost their job, they've got a bunch of bullshit problems that are purely created by the empire of bullshit that have never had to be there. This drop down was never necessary, but still is there because we're dealing with a bunch of legacy systems, and frankly the leaders at the top have lost control. They think they're in control, but actually what they're doing is essentially, in the previous video I explained, it's like essentially being a crazy person or the owner of a fleet of airplanes. You know, on an airplane, knocking the pilot out of the way, saying, hey, I own this plane, so I do whatever I like, putting the plane into nosedive, then in free fall it looks like you're levitating, you think, oh wait, I'm so amazing, I've just flown out of space and now we're essentially weightless because I have taken the plane so high. No, you are in free fall, that's why. And it looks like you're essentially levitating, but that's because everything else is also in free fall and is moving along with you, right? That's what's happening here. If we want to pull out of this nosedive, we have to first of all get these mad people who are still high on this exhilaration of floating to step aside and let the real pilots get back on, pull up the plane, hopefully before it goes into a tailspin, right? So that's what we're doing. We essentially need to get the pilots back in, quickly cycle the system so that then both systems can equally go up, because if you have this, you essentially introduce a system turbulence, shear forces. You know, people will start to take this over, there will be infighting, there will be crimes, you know, actual skirmishes of miscellaneous type. And essentially, or the only thing we'll do globally is increase the proportion of bullshit in our world staggeringly. And whilst we're busy doing this bullshit, essentially, what is a real problem, and this is something that none of the leaders, no matter how amazing and how rich they are, can actually help. For this, we need the help of absolutely everybody globally. Now, these problems are the real problems, and that's the collapsing ecosystems around the world, right? Now, these crackpots think, oh yeah, but we'll solve that by, let's just kill off 2/3, or like, I don't know, what fraction of the world population. Okay, well, that looks like a really amazing idea if you don't really think about it for very long. But the real problem with that idea, which I think there's plenty of evidence around that that's the plan, there's a small problem with that. And that's because our world has survived essentially that in the Second World War, and after that in communist times. So in the Second World War a lot of people died, but in communist China and communist Russia even more people died, right? Now, if that would be a model for success, those countries would have been booming amazingly, and their leaders would be, you know, heading the most amazing research projects and the most amazing everything. But it didn't happen like that. When you kill everybody off, there's no one to actually run the complex systems for you. And there's no one to actually generate this wealth for you. And then you are there in your little bubble and you think, ooh, I'm floating, and meanwhile the plane is now nosediving, and at some point you're going to hit the ground. You know, so this is what it is. And there's a second reason why killing off everybody seems like a really good idea at first, but it's actually total bullshit. And this is because now, in the modern world, and this is actually a non-trivial reason, this is highly non-trivial, and I think this is why these people have totally ignored it. And that's because right now, we're not in the same situation where we were after the Second World War. And that is purely because of the complexity of our systems. And with that, I don't just mean the complexity of our computer programs or the sheer astounding complexity of our tax codes. No, what I mean by that is to even produce something like a calculator, like a keyboard, or a toaster, it takes a supply chain comprising thousands and thousands of people. I have to look up the link, but there's one guy who actually went out and tried to make his own toaster, and that's a telltale sign, because, well, that he failed. That's what's really important. And that's because he realized actually every part of a toaster, I think a toaster consists of, I think almost like 1,000 parts, even more parts than that. So let's say 1,000 parts. You don't think about it like that, but then it has like little electronics and cabling and the coating for the cabling and so on. The plastic casing for the toaster, the metal for this, for the inside, and another metal for the conducting parts, and yada yada yada. You have all this stuff, and every part of that is actually highly specialized. The plastic is such that it doesn't melt under high temperatures. You know, the actual cord, the electronics is inside plastic casing that's suited to that. And everything about a toaster, everything about these 1,000 parts of a toaster are essentially highly specialized. And if you want to produce any one of those, you in turn need a supply chain, again comprising thousands of people. So this already starts with producing the steel that makes the inside of the toaster. That's a highly specialist task, and so on. So if you kill off 2/3 of your population, especially if you kill them off globally, what you're essentially doing is you entirely kill off this highly specialized chain You kill off the know-how, because a lot of the time it's not written down. It's like documentation for software, right? Try reverse engineering software when it's not written by yourself. Good luck. All of those of us who've tried know that this is like, it takes you, you know, orders of magnitude longer than if you'd written it yourself from the start. And the same thing will happen with all these niggly little things that are really down here, expertise down here, knowing about what alloys to use for the metal, for the plastic, how to produce the plastic, how to produce the chemicals that are then used to produce the plastic, how to, you know, make the chemicals in the plastic used to make the chemical in the plastic, and so on in the labs, and all this. It's like a vast supply chain, and in a sense the only reason we can have this standard of living is because there's an entire tower comprising thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing this specialist stuff. And not just that, because I have also heard that these amazing leaders of the world think, right, we have this big computer simulation, everybody's in there, and we will work out who is useful and who isn't. Well, if you're very top down, that will seem like it makes sense. If you actually looked into detail how these systems actually work, you would realize that it's highly dynamic. Not a single company these days goes for 1 year or 2 or 3 years at most without cycling their staff. People leave, people come, people get trained, people retire, people become ill, other people get trained up, and there's this non-stop cycle. So essentially, who's useful now might be unemployed next year, and who looks unemployed, is on drugs, looks like the last dropout, might be the mass genius of next week. We literally just don't know. All of these, when you actually take the time to look carefully into individual situations, individual storylines, and individual life achievements, you realize it's not just a linear progression as these people imagine. We're all just linearly progressing through their wonderful organizations. That's not how it works. People rise through the ranks, think this is a shit company to work for, go somewhere else, start from the bottom and get up even higher. Or they get to a certain level, change to another company and drop down. So there's a non-stop cycling. If you believe, if you take a snapshot and you think, oh, these are the useful people, these are not the useful people, and we're going to kill off the non-useful people, what you'll realize is that these people start dying off, retiring, not fancying to work for you, going somewhere else. And the replacement, you have cut off this side of the cycle, so there's no replacement. So in other words, if you plan to kill off 2/3 of the world population within the next 10 years, one of the things that I can tell to, you know, Mr. Jet Set is that your jets will be grounded. Because the parts that will break, as they naturally break in jets, and there's non-stop maintenance for these high-performance engines, will not be able to be replaced. And if you think that you can ensure that the supply chain, just for your private jets, can be maintained, well, I really encourage you to do that simulation, because I think you'll find that you can't actually do that. Sorry, as I'm speaking, one of the shielding panels, which I have to use just to withstand the attacks from my neighbors, is collapsing. Just a moment. Okay, it managed. Maybe there will be a big crash. So as we speak, because we're in the empire of bullshit, and I'm making this video, I am still being shot in the head from properties around me, because I am actually one of these victims under the gang stalkers, under the corrupt intelligence agencies, you know, not helped by the corrupt press and corrupt courts, which didn't really allow me to actually get out of the situation. So I am really at the bottom of the empire of bullshit. So here we are. So this is just to summarize why I have shielding panels that are sometimes dropping down, you know, next to me, just to allow me to make this video. This is the reality. This is the reality in 2017. Today is the 15th of January 2017, and I'm trying to explain how to cycle out of the empire of bullshit, being at the bottom, being one of those people who is being shot to pieces with microwave weapons, run by a bunch of absolute degenerate, you know, morons, run in turn by a bunch of absolute degenerate psychopaths, doing in total essentially what's called jack shit. So there we are. Okay, so this is the big picture. This is why we need to cycle out of the empire of bullshit. This is why taking other countries over by pushing them down is a really stupid idea to do. And this is why killing off 2/3 of your population is a really dumb thing to do when you're dealing with highly complex systems, because what will happen, to again make this very important point clear, is that your jets will stop working, because the many parts that go into a jet rely on a very highly specialized chain. If you plan on setting off nuclear bombs and meanwhile, you know, weathering it in a cave in Switzerland or somewhere in I don't know, in Latin America, that's also a really stupid idea, because the entire ventilation systems, security systems may be automatic, you know, shield door opening mechanisms will rely in turn on the entire supply chain of software programmers, electronics manufacturers, hardware manufacturers, who they themselves might die off in this process, and then you end up in your cave with the electronic doors stuck and no one there to actually repair them. So this is why it's actually a really stupid idea. World history has shown every time large fractions of the population were killed off, like in communist China, like in Russia, communist Russia, like during the times of the Black Death and the plague and all these things, and cholera and so on. What you essentially have is you're collapsing your society for generations, and it takes generations to recover. And then eventually, you know, these leaders drop down, and meanwhile leaders who are the leaders of these societies, right, rise relative to these leaders. So essentially we have this sort of mechanism. So if you really want to be a golden, you know, you can stay where you are. This is not about revolution and you know, decapitating a leadership. This is about cycling the system down here to give it thrust up, right? So it doesn't matter that if you're in China or if you're in the West, there's equal thrust going up everywhere, because as soon as you go up everywhere, what you really have is you're essentially sitting under a rocket engine, because you have literally millions of people all thrusting up, all producing books, you know, inventions, companies, you know, finding different ways of making the environment cleaner, better, you know, doing transport faster, better social systems. And social systems are important because they pull everybody up. So this is why the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit benefits everybody, the people at the bottom and people at the top. So this is the why the global pivot is so important. And I realized I've actually made this video very, very long, so I put the how into a separate video. So bye for now. Please watch the next step, which is how we're going to do this. So stay tuned, but bye for now. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. This is now the third part of this little series I'm making about the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. If you don't know what I mean by empire of bullshit, please watch my video that's dedicated to the description. I made 2 previous videos about the global pivot. One general introduction about what's necessary. In a nutshell, we're essentially cycling the system. Our systems got inverted. All the people of integrity, high integrity, are in the bottom, at the bottom, and our systems got infiltrated, infected, captured, capsized even, by miscellaneous operatives, intelligence agents, their corrupt buddies, psychopaths, absolutely everything. We have the dregs of society at the top and the good people at the bottom. Now, a society like that nosedives, and really what we need is a society on the rise. We need to have upthrust. And I also would like to re-emphasize the point, because I made this, the second video was about why. Why do we need a global pivot out of what turns out to be the empire of bullshit? And why does everybody have to be on board? And why does it actually benefit everybody? Because in the last video I made the case that it's not just the targeted individuals, the children being trafficked, and all these other victims of fraud and crime who benefit from a system cycle, but it's also the so-called elites, or as I call them, the cartel holders, because they too are living essentially in a bubble of bullshit created around them by powerful psychopaths. And they also do not actually live in reality. They think they have such a better view of what the world truly looks like, but then if they just went out and checked for themselves, they would see that reality doesn't actually match the image that has been created for them. So, in a sense, we are all on the same page. As long as everybody understands what we're talking about, there shouldn't be a problem. The only problem that people should have is if they're psychopaths, if they're corrupt, or if they're criminals. They are on the way out, sorry. They have to adapt, essentially. Psychopaths can function. They can function with integrity. They can emulate us. It's just that right now, there are no pressures for them to do so. So they live out their nature. But that's essentially why psychopaths remain hidden, because they can operate, they can emulate us, but they have to be incentivized, as in forced to do so, because if they can outsmart the system, they will. And they treat us like objects. So if they can somehow, you know, you also don't want to be dominated by your toaster or your kettle or your car, and that's how psychopaths think about us. For them, we're objects. But if there's enough pressure, then they can also operate normally, inverted commas, and not be harmful. Then corrupt individuals can be turned back as well, and I will explain in detail how to recapture a system. I already made a video about that. But there are many, many tricks you can use from systems analysis, and you discover that actually the problem, no matter how vast it seems now, is not as big as you think. If you watch my video about recapture, there I already explained that even if an entire system, so the entire upper part of the system, is entirely captured, even then, to recapture it, you only have to recapture a few elements going up the ranks. You don't have to recover the system entirely, you just have to recover the levers of power. And by the way, this is how psychopaths and criminals captured our systems to start with, even though they're in a minority, because they focused on the levers and positions of power. And because they're psychopaths, they have a natural affinity to those, so they recognize them, they're looking for them all the time because they want to be there. But we are, most of the time, people of high integrity, we focus on our work, we want to do good work, we want to help others. So in a sense, our eyes are outward, and we don't really look behind us to the machinery of power, or the machinery of control in the system that we're in, be that the medical system, the legal system, or whichever system you're working in. Right? So that's essentially our fault. We haven't paid attention, and now we pay the price. But I'm telling you, as soon as the majority starts turning around, we are the majority. So for minority to capture a system takes actually a relatively long time, because they have to somehow eliminate the majority. But for the majority to recapture a system is astoundingly fast once we get going, especially when we're clever about that. So I do not advocate for revolution or any such things. I am just about recapture. First of all, recapture the system and cycle the system back to a healthy, sustainable system that creates thrust upwards for society, not thrust downwards. So in the previous video, I compared it to essentially a plane that has been made to nosedive. You know, the pilot has been kicked out, the pilot being the professional who spent a lot of his time, many, many years training to operate a plane, to fly a plane properly. He is a specialist, he's a highly trained professional, but instead he was knocked sideways by the owner of the airplane, with all the money essentially, and this guy put it into a nosedive because essentially as soon as you've got free fall, you have the sensation of levitation. This is the best analogy I can come up with. You know, and meanwhile, the owner tells everybody on the plane, back in the passenger seats, that actually they have entered, you know, outer space orbit. It's so amazing, and that's why they are levitating. You know, they're so high they're levitating. No, they are levitating apparently because they are in free fall. You know, and that's pretty much, I think this is the best analogy for our economies in our world I could find. You know, we are in free fall, and some idiots think it's like something super, but actually it's not. So we have to pull up the plane before it goes into a tailspin, because complex systems also have tailspin. In a sense, an airplane is a complex system, and anything an airplane will go through is exactly what a complex system goes through when you try to pull it back up from an actual nosedive. The analogy is quite striking. So if we go through in our minds what it's like pulling up, I mean, none of us have piloted a plane, but maybe you've seen movies, maybe you can ask some pilots what it's like, but I think from the movies they show it quite accurately, because once a plane is nosediving, the actual air rushing past it is rushing so fast, if you want to pull it up, you essentially have to apply a force that pushes the nose through the rushing air. That's why pulling up a nosediving plane, because of the laws of physics, is so bloody hard in the beginning, right? So you have to just pull, and in most movies they show how the pilot is just holding on and is just barely manages to move the plane, and hopefully just before it, you know, crashes to the ground, you manage to pull it up, and as soon as you tip the nose, suddenly the fast air rush past the bottom, and then you get this sudden uplift. And it's exactly the same with complex systems because of the same processes. We're now in free fall. We're essentially falling under the full power of these corrupt people who are shooting us to pieces with microwave weapons, who are implanting us, who are poisoning our food, they're breaking into our homes. They've got all their cronies in high places, in the judiciary, in the police, in the medical officers, and they blackmail each other, they threaten each other, and it feels like there's no way for us to pull up the plane. But I'm telling you, as soon as you get a bit, just the tip of the airplane up, the inertia of the system is what's going to flip you back up. And what's the inertia of the system in this case? It is the fact that everybody hates to be threatened. Everybody. Right? And here, even psychopaths threaten other psychopaths. That's kind of like a stressful situation. So, as soon as there's a, you know, it's like when the nose of the plane tips, essentially there's a way, another way for the air to fly past the plane. And it does, and that's what creates the uplift, you know. I mean, both ways. I mean, also on top of the plane, you know, you have a different uplift, and then you suddenly, you know, pull back up again. Now here, in this case, you have to give people another way out. Right now, there's all this blackmail, essentially, and threats, pushing the nose down, pushing the system down, pushing everybody's perception onto corruption, which is essentially downwards. But as soon as you give people an option, that if they do something really simple, their life will improve, everybody rushes there. And the more people rush there, just like, you know, at first, a little bit of air goes over the nose, but then more and more and more, and then eventually you have this, you know, entire, you know, the entire gushing air just fly, you know, rushing past the airplane the right way. And that's exactly the same here. You know, you essentially get a stampede to a better world because people are so sick with this. As soon as you give them a way out, a way to channel that gets rid of that, they will go. And the more people go, the more people are coming. So you get the stampede effect. So just because it's blimming hard right now and no one seems to be responding because everybody's essentially in blackmail, fear, lockdown, doesn't mean this is how it's going to stay forever. No, this is essentially the hardest bit. And I can tell you already, we are past the hardest bit. We already had a little bit of air fly over the tip. And the little bit of air is essentially the high-profile whistleblowers and high-profile professionals who just went public and said, yeah, this stuff seems to be going on. If they were not targeted, they said, yes, this seems to be going on. We're on the case, we're investigating, we bring in our professional skills. Now, if there are people like me, I don't say it seems to be going on. I say it is going on, right? I can feel it every day. I'm being shot at also today. I've been, you know, brutally attacked. And things that I did, I mean, I told you that, for example, just to give you a context, you know, I told you that my hand got damaged and was essentially having pins and needles when I was just begging the German ambassador here in Switzerland to just help me to stop this crime, and he refused. I was in front of the gates of the German embassy as a German citizen, and I was told to essentially get lost. Now, in that phase, I was damaged so hard that essentially I was left with permanent pins and needles because they shot into the right-hand skull of my hand. And I was wondering what this is going to be used for, because this is all one big mind control experiment, brain, you know, brain readout, brain interference experiment that is being done to me. I'm being shot to pieces for that. And essentially what they started doing is essentially vibrate my left hand. So the tingling can be made more intense, and in the end it can be, you know, essentially turned into what feels like vibrations but isn't vibrations. It's essentially disabling your hand by overloading it, to me it seems like, by overloading it with electromagnetic impulses to exactly that part that controls my hand. Right? I think this is what it is. And now through brain interference, as far as I can tell. I mean, they stole my measuring device just a few days ago, so I still have to make a measurement. But they essentially managed to paralyze my entire left arm now. And they did that once I came back home. And just as soon as I stepped into the house, they, you know, essentially the sensation, tingling sensation started crawling up my arm. And before I reached the top of the stairs, it felt like what people describe as vibrations and intense pain. Well, not really pain, but just you know, intense vibrations, so that at first I couldn't hold anything, and in the end I just couldn't use my arm. So that's not, you know, I know why they set it up like that, because they can say, oh, maybe it's a heart attack or something like that. No, flaming isn't. It's like totally different. This is like, it's not even pain, it's like the most weird artificial sensation you ever had in your life. Plus I have these break-ins, and you know, my measuring devices keep being stolen, or you know, were stolen just now. So, you know, what's the chance of having break-ins and weird, you know, medical diseases? No, it's not. This is just the attacks. So this is what we're dealing with. If we want to cycle out, right, after like horrific physical attacks and everything, we really need to recapture the system. So how do we do this? So the first 10 minutes, again, were just the big picture of don't despair. It feels like it's like insurmountable, but I'm telling you now, I have been stalked for a long time. And then I started being physically assaulted, and it's only at that point when I really kicked into action. I was going to the courts and all that. And then I started being hit even harder and harder. And I have despaired, but one of the things I also did is I mapped out the entire targeted community, or you know, this entire crime in time, and I can definitely tell a turn-on curve. You know, especially in terms of how many high-profile people came forward. So in a sense, in the beginning, there were some professionals who had some media appearances, and suddenly there are so many high-profile people, you know, just this year, 2016, going public, blowing the whistle, stepping up to the plate, doing many things. And it's this turn-on curve that shows the system's turning, right? And what I can tell you about the system turning, so in a sense, the system cycle has already begun. In a sense, the pilots, the real pilots, are now on the, you know, on the actual plane controls again, and they started pulling. It's just that they're already pulling, they're doing the hardest work now. The most effective work already is being done behind the scenes. You just don't notice. The plane's going to continue in apparent nosedive without any effect, but that's just normal physics. It's the laws of physics. We still have a distance, you know, it's like almost like the stopping distance of a car. You apply the brakes, but you're still just, you know, rolling or sliding along, right? Even though the brakes have been applied, and it's just the same. So we do have the real pilots in, you know, some aspects back in control, right? They already started pulling. This is now the hardest bit. But essentially, it's not just one plane. It's like having, you know, interconnected many planes at the same time nosediving. So some pilots are already, you know, back at the controls. Other pilots are still in the back, you know, tied up and gagged, as far as I can tell. And they have to be freed and, you know, put back to do their job. But that's essentially what we're doing. But what I'm saying now is that the hardest bit was essentially the decades of people being targeted, not having the internet, not being able to speak up, and so on and so on. And now we do have the internet. I have spoken up, many other people have spoken up, we continue speaking up, and every day, watch it, because there will be this acceleration effect, right? And that is typical of a system cycle. You know, more and more will come out every day. We'll puzzle together who controls the satellites, who's making these devices, how they're using them, how they're interfering with any nano implants you might have, or any other junk they put into us, what to do about it, how to, you know, fight it, and all that's going to accelerate. So we are now essentially in this acceleration phase, but in a sense what I want to make clear is that this time, because it's a complex human system, there isn't one pilot. We need all hands on deck. In a sense, every single one of us has a control, and we all have to be pulling at the same time in a concerted fashion, and then the plane can be made to come up. So this means wherever you are, if you are, let's say in medicine, you have to get back onto the controls, you have to notify people. That's getting back in control, if you like. You take control, you take charge. You tell your colleagues that this is going on. Look for injuries for microwave weapons. Look for implants. Start reading up about nanotech and its effects on medicine. That's just the medical field. Psychiatry, right? You've been bullshitted, my dears, for a very long time. You know, voice to skull has been around since, what, the 70s or the 60s? Right? You have been misdiagnosing people in droves because you never took into account non-medical effects as well. And actually, when you diagnose somebody, if you just look at the medical, you're only thinking about which of these diseases could it be. But what you have to do before you even get onto that bit is decide, is it a disease at all or something else? And you never considered or something else, ever, before in your life. So the first test you do is A versus B. and you settled on A, and then you just decided, is it A or A primed? That's wrong. You first have to do A or B. And B is it maybe voice to skull technology when people hear voices, and you never did that. So psychiatry has to start reading up about it, and you have to, you know, essentially learn and undo the mistakes you did. The legal profession, you have to get on the case. The legal system has been properly screwed, right? So all of us in our respective professions have to get on the case. Well, physics, you know, I mean, I'm not actually a weapons expert, and I never knew much about microwaves. This is not my field, but I'm trying to pick it up, and I'm trying to put it together and use what I know to somehow assist the cause, right? And I have to track down people in academia, because I also used to be an academic, because there seem to be some really corrupt madcap scientists doing essentially Dr. Mengele type experiments. And I shall take on the academics, right? That's my job. And I want to hunt down who these bastards are who are doing these, you know, remote social experiments on people. They have a job, they have somewhere an office, we'll find them, and we have to find them. So this is what we're doing. We're all getting now, you know, we all have to get back on the controls. Whoever you are, whatever you're doing, you now get back on the controls and you pull this up. So, how are we going to pull it up? Well, there's so much I want to tell you, right? There's so much I want to tell you. And what I ideally would like to do is spend another 2 minutes just talking about the general idea, yet again, and then in the next video, just talk about concrete things, where it's literally just a checklist, right? And in the next video, I also would like to reply to the many people who have written to me. And you know, they asked for help. I got so many very, very valuable, you know, recommendations. And in the next video, I also would like to reply to Annie Kasper, who also made, again, a very, very, an excellent video, actually. And I would like to reply to that, because she's got excellent points, and it's all about how to actually, what actually to do to stop it. Hang on, I've just made a set of, yes, I've made a set of things to say. Yeah, but they all go into the next video. They all go into the next video. But essentially this is it. So this is why, you know, this is why we have to do it. It's essentially pulling up the plane. And we need everybody. And it's clear why, right? Because one pilot is not strong enough, right? So you have to, really the force to pull up an entire system is just, you know, superhuman if you do it alone. You can't do it alone. That's why you have to have other people. And these other people don't have to be in the same field as you. In fact, it is better if you have people in the police trying to pull up the police, pull it out of corruption, you know, lawyers who help you, medical professionals who help you. So we have to connect across fields. That's very, very, very important. Don't just talk to the targeted community. You have to reach out, and essentially you have to stretch out your hands, and other people can help, you know, need to help you. This is it. We have to put out tentacles like that. And you have to think, that's exactly what the corrupt people did. You know, the intelligence agencies, they started networking, they started corrupting judges, police officers, and many, many other professions. They put out tentacles. Well, if they can do it, so can we. After all, we're society. They are con artists. Okay? And that's something to keep in mind about all of these people. Corrupt people con others, and frauds are also essentially a con. Right? So these people got to where they are, not because of skill, because then they would be up here. They got to where they are through a con, by cheating people, or by other people being artificially removed. So that's what we're dealing with. And then there's another effect which I would like to finish off with, and this is when, in my video where I explained how capture works, so that you all have this visual image, I said, let's take this as a healthy system, and then someone, you know, a psychopath or corrupt individual, enters the organization, and then climbs the ranks bit by bit, and then corrupts the people below, you know, and so on. And then the next person, this person climbs into the next layer, someone else follows, and so on and so on. And then bit by bit, also this side is corrupted. Remember that? Okay, so in the end, to just show you how that will look, is when a psychopath climbs up here, he will put on pressure on this side, and eventually the entire pyramid here will be working according to his own desires, with maybe some unhappy people left. Or maybe, you know, there's more people of integrity. Maybe he can't actually corrupt this branch, really, but this person, even though he is not or she is not happy to do what she's told, she still has to do as she's told, right? So the organization looks like as if this entire area were corrupted. Now, when you recapture a system, you have to keep in mind, right? I mean, the end state will look like something like that. This entire section appears captured and black, right? And then I said, okay, you'll start to recapture, and you only have to recapture bit by bit these points until you get to the level from where the capture is emanating. And then if you look at it from the outside, it looks like you would have to recapture 2, 4, 6, 7 people. That's not true. You only have to, first of all, recapture 3 levels, you know, not 7 people, but more than that, everybody, apart from the real psychopath here, is not a psychopath and doesn't really necessarily want to be corrupted. So in a sense, what you're actually dealing with is a situation like that, right? You are just dealing with one psychopath in a very high place. Do you think if 4 people club together they could defeat a psychopath? Of course they can. But before, when you thought that you have 7 people to defeat, you would have thought, oh, 4 people could never fight 7. But you don't have to fight 7. Do you see? The problem is amplified. That's why. And as you start recapturing a system, what essentially happens is that, so before then, it looked like that, right? Before then it looked like that. Let me put the magnets back so that it's clear. And what will happen is, as you go, you essentially put pressure on one person, say here, you know, to act correctly. That could be a police officer. You just force him to make a report by, you know, reporting a crime, and then you request your file. Okay, you put this back into working order, and then you start going up to the next level. Then you force this guy, you know, to report it further on, or whatever you have to do at that level. And then once you get to this stage, this person who either hears about it or the chief is too scared to do any monkey business after that, will also essentially ensure that this person isn't put under pressure anymore, right? So if this police officer is already allowed to record microwave attacks, right, because you work the chief, then the other person is also allowed to report microwave attacks. So you've recaptured the system. But essentially, what this is happening here is you recaptured a few and then the others flipped, right? It's almost like, for those who know physics, it's like a phase transition, you know, and suddenly it looks like your domain of integrity got pushed in, right? So essentially, the people who are on the domain boundary, when they flip, it's almost like they're crossing the domain boundary, and the domain expands essentially. The domain of integrity expands. This is how it works in complex systems. And as someone else will start on this branch here, do the same thing, maybe in a different state of the US or a different, canton if you're in Switzerland. And then, if they do the same here, right, you're back to integrity, and suddenly the only problem is at the top. And of course the top will also try to influence. However, if you have recaptured bits, decentralized from the bottom, with many people, then these people are much more likely to listen to where the pressure is highest, and that's from the bottom because we are so many. And then very quickly you have a psychopath who's completely isolated. And when psychopaths are isolated, they absolutely hate that, because most of them are essentially con artists, right? They're tricking people. But if suddenly they feel surrounded and they lost their armies of enablers, they very, very quickly start acting extremely smoothly because they don't want to be discovered. And worst of all, they don't want to lose their high position because they want to climb to the next position of power. So they are willing to essentially flip back into integrity for a cause or two, or until the public attention is passed, to get their way later. Do you see? But that doesn't matter because our eyes are going to be on them forever after now. But very quickly you have flipped the system back, so it's not as bad as it seems. So, as I'm saying, if we're now cycling out of the empire of bullshit, you have to remember that right now we're here. We've got these elites somewhere in La La Land with weird religions and esoterics and beliefs and living weird lives, and just, their in the internal world is even more weird than their real world, the actual life. Anyway, that's just how it is. And then we've got this entire entire upper domain of psychopaths and corrupt people, and then people of high integrity down here, right? And another thing that happens, actually, that I haven't mentioned, is also, and you have to deal with that as well, when you have a system that is entirely captured, like that, for example, and suddenly a person feels, this person suddenly sees his colleague is corrupt, and the boss starts putting pressure on him, then what sometimes also happens is that the person of integrity quits their job. So they leave, and then someone impressionable comes up from below, and this person can then be, corrupted very quickly if they're not as strong as the other person. And then again you have capture, right? And it spreads down. But this effect of the person of integrity leaving, what it essentially does, first of all, in the first instance, right? Before it looked like that. In the first instance, when this person leaves, the proportions of corrupt people against people of integrity is increased. So the concentration of corrupt people overall in this part of the organization increases, right? Because someone of high integrity has been either ejected out of the organization or left. That, of course, increases corruption here, automatically, right? So that's one effect. But then, of course, whoever moves up comes up from a junior position, or from, or externally, and is therefore either way much more impressionable. And then essentially the other effect that happens is that the stop that was here, maybe this person who was there before had years and years of experience and high integrity. When they leave, the stops are removed and corruption spreads down, to more impressionable, more junior members. So when someone of high integrity leaves a company, there's this twofold negative amplification effect. Number one, instantly the concentration of corrupt people increases because the people of high integrity have one person less, and a stop has been removed, so corruption can spread from above through that position downwards. So all of these things have happened, but keep in mind that no matter how black the situation seems now, and no matter, how many whistleblowers do we know, especially in the intelligence community, who have done just that. They quit because they couldn't deal with the corruption. They were revolted by the corruption they suddenly found themselves surrounded by. Projects got taken over, or the projects that they worked on were junked and then replaced by corrupt projects over and over and over. Or they were forced to lie or keep quiet about lying, and so on and so on. And what we've essentially seen is by them leaving, it's in a sense good thing that they left, because they're now external, outside, so they can help us. If they were still inside, they couldn't help us. So that's a good thing. But in a sense, their leaving has accelerated this problem because, people of high integrity weren't in there. So these are all the effects that we're dealing with. And when you look at, essentially, when you're looking at a situation like that, it looks extremely desperate. Because suddenly you think, oh my God, how can we possibly, it's like all captured, And on a national scale, these different branches could be, literally the intelligence agencies and the police, or the police and the courts, or the courts and the medical profession, and many, many other things. And you think, oh my God, they're all captured. But you have to keep in mind that a lot of them are not genuine psychopaths. They have been intimidated, they have been corrupted maybe, and many other effects, or they feel pressure from above and they don't know what to do, or they're just ignorant and they don't know that these things exist. And as we apply pressure, as we spread information, these people will flip back. So the problem isn't this big. The problem is sometimes just one person at the top. Some person, where this all comes together. Okay, and this actually gets me to the last point of how do you find these corrupt people? Well, you find them by recapturing bit by bit, applying pressure. So this person, a police officer, is forced to be honest. Then his superior, the chief, is forced to be honest. Then the entire police department for the region or for the country is forced to be honest and report about these things honestly across the regions, right? And if he doesn't do that, if he is not willing to spread, essentially, the permission to report, say, microwave assaults from one region to the next, we know that he's the psychopath. Or the captured person, or the corrupt person. If he's not willing to do that, then it's either him or the person above, right? It could also be that it's this person. Sorry about that. This person applying pressure on him. But you essentially keep going up until people stop cooperating. And then you stop. For example, in my case, I went to the embassy, as you know, and I spoke the very first time to the security officer, which is essentially, I think, a step below from the ambassador. So someone who works for the embassy but isn't the ambassador. And he agreed with me that, yes, I am most likely being attacked by microwave weapons from the BND. No problem. He was of high integrity. But then, next level up, when I wanted to talk to the ambassador of, okay, what are we going to do? Because a German citizen is being now, in his own, region of influence or region of competence, is being bit by bit mutilated to death. What's the plan for dealing with this? How are we going to tackle the problem? He blocked, right? So that's essentially, I got past one person, and the next person I'm blocked. Or maybe I should say down here, right? So, I approached the embassy. This is Mr. Kanzler, the security officer. And he says, yeah, sure, I think you're right. There's the BND attacking you. And that's the truth. I know it's the truth because I was attacked literally a kilometer from the BND. So, yeah, he didn't, reveal anything staggering there. But then, when I try to talk to the ambassador, he blocks. But I got one meeting with Ms. Richter, who at first was incredulous, but at the end of the meeting, she said she's going to look into it. So at least, I did have a meeting with her. But then she disappeared. And then when I tried to contact the embassy, talking to the ambassador, addressing the ambassador straight away after I came back, the ambassador blocked. I still haven't received a reply, even though high-profile whistleblowers have written to him. So the question is, where's the corruption? Is it the ambassador? Is the ambassador directly involved in the microwave targeting? I mean, he is very likely a BND agent. Is he organizing the targeting of German people in Switzerland, using the fact that it's outside of Germany as a sense, a cover for the BND, that they can get away with it as long as they do it to their own people abroad. Is that what it is? And that's the question I'm now dealing with. Is it him? Is he in on it? Is he genuinely corrupted? Or is it just that someone in the Auswärtiges Amt, so the Foreign Office in Germany, is forcing him to be corrupt? In that case, if Dr. Otto Lampe at some point cooperates, right, and actually tries to help me, it means that this bit got recaptured, right, and then we're going one up, right? If the Auswärtiges Amt cooperates, right, and they say, oh gosh, yes, no, we need to tackle, microwave assaults, if we ever get to that stage, then I will also say, hang on, I know for sure that a German citizen in Belgium, that has been mentioned to me, has approached the embassy. What about your people in Belgium? If then the people in Belgium, who maybe go back to the embassy, also get given a green light, and the German ambassador to Belgium is also allowed to, take the reports about microwave assaults and maybe starts to help the victims, then we have recaptured the system. And then if people cooperate, we know, okay, the actual real corruption is coming from higher up. Now, what is above the Foreign Office? Well, it's actually the Foreign Intelligence. They seem to control the Foreign Office. It's not the other way around. I think it is this way around. Officially it's the Foreign Office. Also, for example, in the UK, the Foreign Secretary has supervisory duties towards MI6. But come on, how can one person supervise MI6? I mean, that's bollocks. It's the other way around, right? The Foreign Secretary is essentially a poodle for, a lapdog for MI6, I think. This is how I would expect it from systems analysis. The bigger system controls one person, not one person really having this weird power. So, this is now cycling out of the empire of bullshit. This is how we're going to do it. That's the idea. It will be like pulling up a plane. Okay, so if it feels hard in the beginning, don't despair. It's hard. The hardness in the beginning is no indication for how hard it will be in 3 months' time. No, it will get easier and easier, Even though you can't see the difference straight away, pilots are already pulling, and the nose has already tipped. We have to now pull together even harder to just flip it back up and then, start rising again. So this is what we're up against, but it is now the hardest time, and it's also the time where we really need the help of everybody simultaneously the most. Later on, not everybody has to help in the same way or at the same time, but now we really have to be like all together, pull, otherwise we're literally going to crash to the floor, and that much is certain, and we are very close actually. We're very close to actually hitting rock bottom. And as you know, it seems fine when you're nosediving, everybody's still healthy and alive, but when you hit the bottom, that's when death comes instantly. And it's the same with complex systems as well. And if you don't believe me, look back at the Second World War. The Gestapo did exactly this. They infiltrated everything. They started, putting the operatives in. They started essentially robbing people, dragging people out of their homes and so on. Then they started putting work camps everywhere, and before you know it just went boom. Gas chambers were fired up, and it was essentially Second World War and death. Right? And it just went within a few years. That's a system, that is in a sense a bad system cycle, and in a sense this is what we're trying to avoid. And we have good people in good places now. Please now, all together now, let's pull this up. Or we already have, individual Auschwitz camps already. The microwave, the gas is already entering the chambers. We are already being essentially, instead of carcinogenic gases, we are being irradiated with things that give us cancer, that damage our organs. The gas chambers are already firing. Individual concentration camps are already online. They're operational, right? And more individual concentration camps are being, planted everywhere around the country by the intelligence agencies and their minions. And I insist on that because only they have simultaneously access to the stalking networks, can break into homes, have military technology, yada yada. So that's already there. But now, please, let's pull it up, or we will have a second, a rerun of the Second World War. And this time it will make the Second World War look like, literally a walk in the park. And why can't we have World War III, even though the weapons industry really would want that, so that, the weapon stacks are cleared out and they can sell the newest weapons to crackpot psychopaths at the top? Well, the reason why we can't have World War III is because our ecosystems are already collapsing, right? And with that I mean the bio-ecosystems. And the Second World War we managed to weather because our systems weren't as complex, and because nature was a lot healthier. Now nature is dying, and we've got hugely complex systems. If we set off World War III, we'll all die within very, very few years. Either because we die of the primary assault, or the people who are left cannot operate the complex systems and therefore won't even be able to replace the cord for a toaster, And a lot fewer people know how to even operate a gas stove now. So a lot more people will die that way. And the third thing is all the nuclear weapons set off and miscellaneous, other chemical and biological weapons and electromagnetic weapons that will be set off in World War III will wipe out whatever is left of our, functional biological ecosystems. So most likely all complex life will be wiped and we're back to bacteria and plankton in the seas. And it will be a restart from that. And that's the mathematical outcome, essentially. As far as I can tell, there's no other way to pull this off. So World War III is a really fucking stupid idea right now. The only way to do it is to pull up the plane. And actually a lot of people are on the board. I mean, China doesn't look like it wants to be really drawn into World War III. Russia certainly doesn't look like it wants to be drawn into World War III. Seems fairly patient. The only people who are literally messing around and running amok like a bunch of idiots are essentially the somewhat deluded leaders in the Western world. And meanwhile, we've got collapsing Western countries. The US is collapsing economically, so is Europe. I mean, that's bullshit. So we have to pull it up. So this is again the big picture of how we're going to do it. We're all going to pull, but this is again too abstract. So the final video about the empire of bullshit and the global pivot out will be essentially a detailed recipe. And that will be the next video. And that will be literally a to-do list. No big picture, it's literally just a to-do list of how to do exactly what I said in the previous few videos. Bye for now. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. This is the fourth part on the little series I'm doing about pivoting out of what I call the global empire of bullshit. And just to remind people who've just joined, so this is the end of a long series, and what we're dealing with essentially is that we have our systems, as far as we can tell, in deep capture, whereby the intelligence agencies infiltrated. I mean, certainly they seem to control the leadership, they seem to have infiltrated the press, but also the police. They seem to have placed essentially gang stalking networks everywhere that are harassing people and attacking them with directed energy weapons and many, many other horrific things. And currently the situation in our society seems to be that the entirety of our society, of our leaders, seem to be essentially as good as in deep capture. And for the victims of the intelligence agencies, the situation is particularly urgent because they're essentially dying. They're being shot into with military microwave weapons. And they have horrific experiments done to them to do with mapping out the brain. I don't really want to get into the big details now, because they're horrific, first of all. I really want to focus on what to do about it, but that's the reality. These are follow-on experiments from the death camp experiments in the concentration camps. The actual, these Nazi controlling human being sort of experiments. And it's horrific. I mean, I'm one of the victims as well, but I think my experience, because I've been openly assaulted for, inverted commas, just a year. So I have, microwave beams shot into me, not just every hour, but every couple of minutes. And I'm also shot at whilst I'm giving this talk. But it still pales in comparison with what has been done to other victims. Some of them have been targeted and assaulted and maimed and turned upon for decades, sometimes their entire life. So this is the horrific situation where essentially the intelligence agencies, as far as I can tell, committing crimes against humanity. And continuing to do so despite public appeals, despite court cases, despite appeals to cease and desist. You can see my own appeals being ignored on my Twitter, on my YouTube. It's all public for everybody to see, and my the assaults against me continue. So we're now trying to think of what to do. And in the previous videos, I've already explained, and please watch the previous episodes of this global pivot out of what I call the empire of bullshit. And it's not quite as flippantly as you think, because I think this is exactly what it is. It's a runaway process whereby essentially the most corrupt and the dumbest in our society have essentially been placed into the upper parts of the leadership, and everybody with high integrity and actual skill seem to have ended up on the bottom. And once you have the situation, of course, everybody who's corrupt and everybody who doesn't really have any skill is scared of losing their position, right? Because for obvious reasons. So what are we going to do about it? And in my previous video, I already proposed that actually the situation doesn't look like this. Our entire system has slid down several levels, and the people who are here are not actually here. Sometimes we have entrepreneurs and doctors who should be actually leading, teams. But they have been, first of all, stopped from doing that by corrupt individuals. But it's even worse than that, because they've been pushed down by these gang stalking networks that are being operated, right? So they are pushed one level down by the handlers, and they're also exposed to severe levels of criminality. Now, essentially they are below even the criminals that are part of the gang stalking networks who come into homes, who poison people. Even they are placed higher than the victims, who have very high integrity. So what actually happened in our society is that, as far as the victims are concerned, there are certain victims who are now entirely at the mercy of this corrupt layer that has been interposed between them and actual real society. So as far as, for example, in my case, I can't leave the house without being shot in the head by now. Inside my home, I can't be pain-free because they shoot through the walls and they are targeting me. And these criminals are paid, right? They are criminals, so they're one level below our society, but they get paid and I do not. So I am now effectively even one layer below. So what I'm saying to the victims is, what we have to do with you is get you out of this quagmire, and we have to place you back to where you belong in society, which is, you know, here. Because you essentially have high integrity. That's why you're one of the people who are targeted, and you are very intelligent, right? Or there's something about you that, you know, they really want to stop. And in actual fact, you're much more than that. You're even much higher than that. You're up here. Because what you actually went through is essentially, you know, it makes the Navy SEAL training just pale in comparison. You've been essentially to hell and back every single day, sometimes for decades, right? So you are not even here. You are something very special. If you're still alive, please don't kill yourself, because you're one of the most precious people. Must be hard as a diamond by now. So we have to put you back to where you are, where you belong in society. How are we going to do that? So what we're going to do, because this is the situation now, essentially, is we're going to lift you out bit by bit, right? We're going to place you here, and eventually you will have a prominent role in society when a lot of people start listening to you. But first we have to lift you out and put you back here, right? Because I put you one layer above, you know, standards. So first of all, you have to go above the gang stalkers. This is just the bottom rung of society, you know, one level up from the criminals. These are the people who just essentially exist, you know. They don't really do very much. But you have to climb one level higher, because you have to help me and other people and other victims to actually cycle the system. So we're going to cycle the system by placing you here, and then it's your job to actually move up and help us. Okay, how are we going to do this? So this is how we're slowly recapturing the system and trying to, you know, do the system cycle. So I explained the system cycle much better in another video, where you can actually see how low down this entire system is, and then I explain how we place people there. But concretely, how are we going to do this concretely? And there are two classes of people now. There's number one, the victims, and there are non-victims. The non-victims could be family members. It could be professionals who assist the victims. They're doctors, they're lawyers, police officers to whom these crimes are reported, or external parties who are not directly involved. They're not directly the doctors of these victims, but they still want to help because they realize that these are crimes against humanity and they are expanding. These are people who you know, can help us. So they can be either outside the government system, so even inside the government system, right? What you're essentially trying to do is restore society, repair society. So for the victims, there will be certain things. Hang on, how high can I go? So there will be one set of things to do for victims. Okay, and then there will be another set of things. How far can I go? For others who are trying to, you know, to assist. So point number one, in lifting people out from here, what we have to do, number one, is restore their finances and restore their standing in society. So I would say, point number one, right, for the victims, you have to go public. We need to know who you are. We need to hear your story. If you just make a blog, if you just make, you know, Twitter's kind of disjointed, but if you make a blog, a Facebook page, or you just make a brief video about yourself, literally, I've got the cheapest video camera that exists. Just plug it into a laptop and make a very short video of yourself. Explain what happened to you, explain who you are, and explain where you would like to be placed back. You know, if you have a business that was destroyed and you want to restart that business, tell us. If you've been ejected from a type of job, say you were a nurse and you want to become a nurse again, tell us, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be by the end of 2017? And of course, you want to have all attacks against you stop, but let us know what they have done to you. Have you been stalked? Have you been irradiated, robbed? What do we need to do to restore you to where you would be naturally? So that's number one. Here, for the victims, go public, and then essentially do that, and then tell us where you want to be. Okay? So where do you want to be placed? Back as a nurse? What would you like to be able to do again? Because that's what is going to be your goal. By the end of 2017, we'll want you to be there. This is essentially the plan. By the end of 2017, these programs have to be shut down, and you have to be where you want to be. So, today is the 16th of January, we don't have much time, we better get going. How are we going to restore your finances? Well, number two that you're going to do is open a crowdfunding website and tell people about it, right? We should collect all the crowdfunding websites, and then you say, I'm collecting money for, you know, either to pay my subsistence because these people have destroyed my income opportunities, or to launch my business if you still have a job but you want to do what you were prevented from doing. And then you use crowdfunding here. Meanwhile, the others, who are not victims themselves, what I want you to do is essentially here, collect them, so pick up on it, collect all the, essentially the profiles and the links and so on, right? So collect links, profiles, follow Twitter, because these victims are now our job in society. Follow their Twitter account, follow their YouTube account, and so on. And then, when they have their crowdfunding, it is your job, because you were never affected by this. It is, you could say, oh, why should I pay money to somebody else? It's because we're cycling society. If you want to improve society, we start with the people who are essentially the hardiest. They have gone through hell, right? We'll restore them. And we'll do, by the way, the same thing for people who essentially have been broken down with child abuse, and the children as well who have suffered this. If the courts can't pay compensation, it is essentially our public duty that we pay. You know, our taxes have been mismanaged, and you know, our currencies are collapsing, but there are ways to get our money back. Don't worry, you know, and women like Karen Hudis are working on that. We're now cycling our society, but we have to, you know, as far as I'm concerned, what I'm working on is essentially helping people back, right? Lifting them back out of this misery, and I need your help. So what we're going to do the next couple of years, just say, well, if you're paying, you know, 20 euros per month for your mobile phone subscription, how much would you pay per month to actually restore society, but in a transparent way, so that you control where the money goes? Well, decide on a sum. What can you spare, right? Can you spare, I mean, 2 coffees per week? Would you invite 2 victims per week for coffee? Well, a coffee in London, last time I was there, was £2.50 at least, right? £250. So 4 weeks, right, per month, you've got £5 per month. Can you give £5 per month to a cause? Sorry. £10 per month. I've briefly lost it. £10 per month. Would you be willing to, you know, give £10 per month to a cause? Right? It's like paying literally 2 coffees per week to repair society. Are you willing to pay £50 per month? I mean, you know your expenditure, you know. And if you have ludicrously high expenditure and you're about to buy yourself a yet even bigger plasma TV, just have a look at how much cheaper can you get the plasma TV, and then the difference you can invest in society. You know, there are many, many ways to think about it, but essentially, you know, this is what we have to do, is essentially fund them. Either fund them ourselves or help raise money. I'm sorry, I should just say. Right? This is what we're doing. You either fund them yourself. If you don't have the money, you help to raise money. How do you help to raise money? Well, you can tweet, you can blog about it, you can say, please, please, everybody, you can tweet and blog this, you know, the crowdfunding websites, at other people, you can let them know that this is going on, and so on and so on. So this is how we're going to restore the finances, right? So that is just one step, right? The second thing is restoring the reputation. This is finances. What about the reputation? Well, what we'll do is, first of all, we'll put together, you know, for the victims, and this is done by others, you know, and also other victims as well. So this is something that we'll do together. So this is essentially finances, and this is now reputation, because these people have been smeared as mad. So what we're going to do, and this is going to be important for later as well, we will put together, and this is done by others, you know, whistleblowers, experts, professionals, and victims. Together, we have to make information packs. And these information packs are to be given to doctors, who the victims might see, but also police officers, because the police officers still seem to have a protocol of just stamping everybody as mentally ill who just dares to come forward. Well, this is not the state to continue. The short answer is, as far as I can tell, right, 70% of the victims, or the vast majority, seem to be female. Now, typically people are smeared with schizophrenia and paranoia. Those are mental health diseases or issues that essentially are 60% male. So that explanation doesn't fit. Also, a lot of the psychiatrists never learned about voice to skull, never took that into account, never took into account that there might be a non-medical explanation for it, because they themselves couldn't possibly imagine the rampant, widespread amount of criminality in the intelligence agencies. No one could have actually reasonably guessed that or believed that. You know, I understand you can't believe it, but you have to remember, if you're a psychiatrist or medic, what you can or cannot believe has no bearing on reality. So you have to take these information packs, and for that we have to combine expert testimonies with whatever, you know, the victims are saying. We have to go through and actually explain to the public what is happening. Now, these information packs will be used to restore your reputation. Also, I forgot to say, family and friends, right? Because sometimes family and friends also don't believe victims. So all of that is going to be used for that. And then this is going to lead on to essentially make put together sample court bundles. Okay, and this is very important because this is leading up to the next step, which also has to do with your finances and reputation, which is mounting court cases. And I'm serious about it. Yes, we will mount court cases because these are crimes against humanity, either individually or together. We will do this. So that is the that part. For the court bundles, what I have got in mind, and this is now where the victims and others can, both contribute. What I would like to see is that victims, those who are comfortable, only those who are comfortable with this, if you would be willing to have essentially write up your victim testimony, who you are, what happened to you, maybe with your contact details, address is very sensitive, so that should only actually be, made public if someone is actually using that for a court case. But you can put out sample victim testimonies where you say you are willing to testify in court that this is also something that happened to you, to support another victim's case. So those victims who are very comfortable with coming forward, it would really help us if you write up your own victim testimony. Okay, and I should put out the sample of what I mean by that, right? But this is the end goal here. Why? Because it's when you put many victim testimonies of credible sources, of people of high integrity, who are willing to put their name and essentially the name to this statement and say under oath, yes, this is what happened to me. If you put those things together, then you can actually see that the offenses are repeating. There's a program. And for example, many people had break-ins, a lot of people were poisoned, a lot of people had their car tampered with, electronics damaged, valuables stolen, gang stalking, the lot, But if you put many together and totally independent people from all across the country or from across other countries are saying the same thing, that has got a high value in court. And this is very good because we're still up against having to somehow explain to a judge what is sometimes classified technology, which we have to reverse engineer, right? But no one can expect you to then reverse engineer classified technology by yourself. I believe that a judge should also be able to, I think in the civil courts, there are different layers. I think in criminal courts you have to essentially prove beyond doubt, or something like that. Dear lawyers, please forgive me if I smudge now the differences. But in civil courts, which is where this would happen, it has to be on the balance of probabilities. Now, the intelligence agencies have shown to the world what incredible amount of lying, sometimes perjury and criminality they are capable of. So, what's the probability they're going to do it again? I don't think a judge will necessarily take that much convincing, but you have to convince them of the details of what happened to you. That is actually reasonable. And when you look at many victim statements, and they're all the same, and all of them with horrific physical injuries, it's pretty clear to a judge. And we will be watching the judges, I assure you. There will be thousands of people watching the judges and making sure that no nonsense happens in court. Right? These will be highly public court cases, and we will take care of that. So, your victim testimonies, but every single victim, even if you're not happy to put your victim story out there, that's okay. What this is meant to be is take the people who are in a position where they are comfortable enough, and you pick which of those victim testimonies fits your situation, so that you can take those and take it to a judge and say, listen, this is what happened to me, it matches one-to-one, or this aspect, is common, that aspect is totally standard amongst victims, and you can take that to a judge. This is why I want essentially a collection of public victim testimonies, and then I would suggest that the address, the details for a court case, if you're a witness, you have to reveal that. But then somebody who wants to use your documentation in a court case can say, look, this is my lawyer, or this is my court case, I've got a court number, please send your details to the court, with the name and address, and then you've got a certain way of certifying that it's not just a shill, an agent misusing the revelation of your address. But then again, if you're a targeted individual yourself, you do know that the agencies have your name and address, right? Because they're harassing you. So, anyway, but you don't necessarily want to put it out on the web, and that's okay too. So there are mechanisms we can do that. So that will be the victim testimonies. And what I also would like to have from the others, whistleblowers, professionals, experts, and other things, essentially expert testimonies here. And I would like you to also, those who are happy to assist the stopping of crimes against humanity, to essentially, can you read that? To essentially put these things up online, right? So that other victims can refer back to it. So standard things about the technology, like if you're a microwave weapon expert, yes, these are the things that can be done with weapons, these are the typical symptoms, and so on and so on. So if you put that out there and you're willing to appear in court as an expert witness, please write it up. If you're a doctor and you dealt with many, many cases of targeted individuals, victims of the intelligence agencies, you know about microwave injuries, you have maybe seen cases, or you have read up about them, and you can tell with your expert knowledge as a doctor that yes, this is precisely what you would expect. Please write us a testimony. Please, you know, you can either get together with specific victims who you trust are genuine and put out what you can say and certify about that if you're willing to appear as an expert witness. We all have to keep in mind that what the intelligence agencies are doing is infiltrate everything. So they'll try to shove fake victims in our faces, and they have been doing that for decades, sometimes to farm information and to mislead us. And they will also try to shove fake experts into our faces. And this is why what I would like to do is have a collection of expert witnesses with maybe a brief video about the expert who has written that with his brief bio, and you know, and then ideally there will be the witness or the expert testimony, a brief video about the expert saying, yes, you can use my testimony in your court case, I'm willing to appear as a, you know, certifying what I've just said under oath, right? And then a victim can decide, do I trust this person? Would I like to have this person as my expert witness in court? That would be something that would really, really assist us. And I think there are, by nowadays, people have attacked so many professionals that these professionals have colleagues, and their colleagues can certainly certify it. And there's nothing stopping an expert who's also a victim from, you know, certifying, because it's not like just because someone shoots microwave weapons at you, suddenly you lose your ability and all your decades worth of experience. So it's not like that. So expert testimonies, anybody who is, you know, has got expert knowledge. So this already gets us into a better shape than where we are now. Okay, so victims, please go public. If you're not happy going public, then you probably also won't have a public crowdfunding page. You can maybe have a crowdfunding page for something else. Name it something else, like you want to have, I don't know, some other project in your life. Maybe you say, I would like to start a company, and then collect money for that. That's also okay. You know, label it as something else, but then you can't really, you know, collect money under this program, but maybe you can. Maybe find ways around that. You know, write up your victim testimony, and that's the other thing to do. For all the others, please, we'll have to collate these. We have to keep an eye on these people. So collect the links, the profiles, follow their Twitter, follow their YouTube, follow them on Facebook, and then help us to raise money or contribute, you know, invest into our future society in a sense. And then if you're an expert, write up expert testimonies. So that's one set. And this is all with the intention of restoring finances and restoring reputations. However, this is not yet how to actually fight the system. And that I would like to put into a separate video, because I have to wipe the whiteboard and this video is long enough. So how we're going to cycle the system in detail goes into the next video. So bye for now and watch the second part. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. This is the 5th part of a little series I'm doing about essentially the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. I refer you to the previous episodes where I describe in detail, you know, find links below this video about what I term the empire of bullshit and, you know, what this global pivot is about. In the previous session, I started talking about how to do the transition, and because it's quite involved, I split it over several videos. So here, now we continue. The last episode was about how to restore the victims' finances, very, very important, because part of this, the takedown program of the intelligence agencies is to destroy victims' finances like that. The other part is to destroy their reputation, to smear them with mental health issues and so on and so on, so that the intelligence agencies can essentially do whatever they like with you, which, as we now know, is essentially maiming and murdering you at will. As sick as that sounds, this is what the data seems to show. So now, the first one was about restoring the finances and then restoring the reputation. These are the 2 points of attack about you. And also with your reputation is also incorporated another line of attack, which is essentially towards your family. They try to snip your social links. So hopefully when you have actual evidence and you can point to a community of high-profile whistleblowers, I'm not just talking about myself at all, there are very, very whistleblowers, high-profile whistleblowers out there who you can refer to who are investigating this and who are targeted themselves. So we now are all coming forward, and we're coming forward as one big front. So if you feel insecure or you feel like your family doesn't believe you, I have made these videos public, and I am entirely open and transparent about what's happening to me, because I want you to be comfortable, to feel comfortable coming forward. I know that there are other problems. For example, I myself, at the end of October 2016, was trying to go public. This was, I'm sorry, not public, to go to the police and report a brutal physical assault on me at night in a hotel room. And then the UK police tried to smear me with mental health and actually launched, just before midnight, an entire elaborate intimidation theatre that, in my view, only MI5 could have really instigated and pulled off like that. The entire episode didn't make a shred of sense. I have posted the video online since then. I think I called it MI5 Crimes Part 4, and you can actually see the police officers there. And I insist that these things have to stay public, because this is what has been done. So you can see it for yourself, how they act, but we do not cower, because this whole, what I did then is I published, before I asked the police officers, and I said I'm going to film the entire interaction. I was inside my own private, my private quarters as in my hotel room at the time, and they said yes, it's fine, we're filming too. So they had their body cams, I had my camera placed on the side, and I was filming the interaction, so that's okay. And because these are public servants and this is public interest, I published it now. I also would like to draw your attention to the fact that I think the police officers at the scene acted correctly. As far as I could tell, there was nothing that I found objectionable. What I did find objectionable was the fact that this entire scene was even launched from their headquarters to start with. But I think the people at the scene, most of them, certainly the senior police officers with their body gear, were entirely oblivious to what actually is, the bigger picture here. So that's what we do. We do not get cowed, we move forward. And then the other thing I also did is request my crime report, which Greater Manchester Police to this day has refused to actually give it to me. Maybe they just need longer. I mean, probably they have to, I would almost allege that they are making stuff up, and they now probably turning to the BBC, TV series scriptwriters to come up with a good story of how to explain what actually happened. But as it stands, I still haven't received my crime report, even though I requested it. But anyway, maybe they need to be given more time. So, and now I'm going to make everything public on what we're going to do to help the victims, because 2017 has to be the year when this comes to a stop. We have crimes against humanity, we've got public mutilations, we've got public executions, people have their eye, their heart, their brain, their internal organs damaged, essentially live on camera now, and the intelligence agencies are so utterly degenerate and so infested with rampant criminality and utter, boundless, human life disregarding arrogance that they can't bring themselves to stop it, even though it's bleeding obvious that they are the culprits, and probably their contractors, but they are in charge of fighting terrorism. Instead, they covered it up, they perpetrated it themselves, and now we're going after them. So, the first part was about restoring victims' finances and their reputation. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do everything, I should also say everything at the same time. Okay, so it's not just like first we have to finish this process and then we move on to the next. No, this will be a decentralized, what I propose is a decentralized program of coming online. And I want it to be decentralized across countries, regions, languages, everything. We all work together in progress, right? With our progress, we help each other, but without having actually solid links. And you know why? Because if you try to have solid links, they try to break us apart. They'll try to interfere with our websites, our communication, and so on. So everyone should broadcast out to the broadest audience possible, because this is how you recruit people from everywhere around you, and it's very, very hard to sabotage. They can, of course, try to make your YouTube videos disappear, but I am going to make cross-checks, and I'm going to spread on different platforms all the videos that I'm making. So, the last one was just about the victims, but now how we're going to recapture the system. So this is now about recapturing the system. And I would like also in this video to reply to Annie Kasper, who made an excellent video, and I watched it, and I think she has got excellent points, and I shall link it. Because I'm also what we're doing is I'm broadcasting publicly, and I reply to her publicly, and I really liked her public statement, because then other people can make up their mind about what do they think about our suggestions. Do they want to contribute? Do they want to go off on a branch, try something else themselves? But we'll keep each other posted, essentially publicly, and I think that's the best way, because there's a huge invisible army of people who are not broadcasting publicly, but they are there to help us, and they are helping us, and we need to keep them updated, and we will keep this public conversation going. So, wherever you are in the world, you can listen to Annie, you can listen to my videos. I'm going to have a conversation with Annie, essentially, because it's so productive, and you can join us at any point. You can also log off at any point. You don't have to be with us throughout the time. You contribute at the level that you're comfortable with. So, or not at all, as you like. So Annie, I really liked it, talking about how to recapture a captured system. I really, really liked your suggestion of a hit list. And I love the name. We will have a hit list. And this is essentially, and what Annie said is, we're not going to harm anybody or kill anybody. This is not what it is. This is essentially to whom we're going to address our pleas and our, essentially our compassion and our information and so on about these cases. And these are the people we will ask to help us, because they have a public duty to assist us. Drawing up a hit list, I think, is fantastic. And essentially, as I understood Annie, she was saying, we're going to not just drop a hit list, we're also going to essentially reach as high as we can. We'll do that. And I think the way she also meant it, and the way I understood it, is that we not just have, the top, like, the President of the United States, or, just presidents of different countries, but we're going to have an entire, list. So people at the bottom, people in the middle, people at the top, and so on, but we will have a hit list. And, we can have a public hit list. In that sense, those are the people who we're going to address. Those are the people who we're going to target now, but in a positive way, with our pleas and so on, with our requests for help. And then we're going to move from there. And I really love that idea, because I think this is exactly what we should do. So I think to start with the recapture, we should, first of all, victims but also others. Hang on, I always have to check what you can see. Yeah, you can still see that. So we've got people who are victims themselves and people who would like to assist. And I think both of them, we should start off with a hit list. And this hit list would be the people who we'd like to contact. So for example, if you are an individual victim, your hit list would, for example, comprise a certain police officer. Let's say this is the police. And then, you try to target this person. Or maybe you're even lucky and you get through to a police officer who actually helps you. So, let's say this is the police, so you're targeting a police officer here. And your hit list will be maybe, a local police. Say, I'm just playing it through. And then, maybe also a doctor who you would like to inform about it. You want to have a doctor who you want to have on your case, say, like here. But you can also aim higher. You can also say, well, there's, somebody from a certain charity running a charity. People on the ground are really helpful, but I would like to address the head of a charity here, right? And I want this entire charity to help me. So this could also be, police, doctors, charities. Or maybe you also want to aim higher and you would like to address if, say these are the psychiatrists and none of them know about voice to skull and these sort of attacks, then you can maybe also address, the psychiatric association and give them information about these crimes because they have to be brought up to date as well. So maybe, how would you call it, professional bodies maybe, professional. And this is just an example here, by the way. This is not the hit list, because Annie did have a hit list that she proposed. And today I'm just talking in the most general terms. So I'm not modifying anything Annie said. I'm not, I'm not approaching the content. I think, hers is a standalone, very valuable idea. And, should we listen to it standalone? I'm just generalizing it for other victims. So the hit list, essentially, is your points of attack that you would like to start with. Like, who would you like to start with? And so on and so on. And maybe you want to also address, on my hit list, for example, I had the German ambassador, because I live in Switzerland as a German citizen. I'm now being attacked here with a type of attack that quite publicly started in Germany. So I know German intelligence is involved, and I'm still blaming them, as well as British intelligence, because that's where my targeting started. So, on my hit list, I also publicly, I would recommend everybody that your hit list contains the heads of intelligence of your country, because they are the ones doing it. Or if you live in a country and you're targeting stuff at somewhere else, it is the heads of intelligence of the countries where you were affected significantly. So I would put very importantly, head of Secret Service. As, as far as I'm concerned, these people need to have essentially an administrative crosshair, on their forehead until this stops. So we make a hit list, and then the question is, how do you go about recapturing a system? Because maybe you approach your local police officer here and he just rejects you and tries to section you, say. But then, as I said, I made a video about recapturing an organization. What you have to keep in mind, and what I said at the time, is that if you approach your local police, you don't do it alone, okay? If you want to approach them, you either have literally a group of people around you. So first of all, maybe your hit list will start off with family members. You convince them first by showing them these videos, by telling them that there's now an international, global effort to stop these crimes, get your family to listen to, and get your family to go along with you to the police station, or have a friend who trusts you, or try to be in a group. So with the police, in particular, what I would recommend is the following, and I would actually have specific recommendations for victims. So in the case of the police, keep the following in mind. First, don't go alone, if you can help it, right? Find someone who you trust. Second, carry a dictaphone. Ideally carry two, literally, but basically record the conversation. And this trick about carrying two dictaphones is, I think, in this case crucial, because we're dealing with deep corruption and unfathomable criminality. So a little bit of, given how much cheating we're exposed to in criminality, this is okay what I'm going to suggest to you. In the public, it is actually in the public interest. My dictaphone cost me about 15 euros or something. And, just try it out, make sure that you can record stuff. I just had it in my handbag. I recorded my appearance at the police station. And there I said, I just had my phone, it's priming, I actually had a separate dictaphone. And I just said, excuse me, I had my phone open, and I said, excuse me, is it okay if I record this conversation? And the dictaphone was running all along anyway. And he said, no, you can't. And I was like, okay. And I put down my phone. Meanwhile, I continued recording. And thank goodness I did, because now I've got evidence of what exactly I said to the police officer. And there's absolutely nothing in that could have possibly triggered this mental health shenanigans that was then pulled off at midnight several hours later. And because of this criminality, because of the cover-up, we know now exists in the police, and I've seen it myself, covertly record it. You can't just go to a police station and be searched, so have it in your handbag, have it in your jacket or somewhere. Make sure the audio is good enough if you record people like that. But when you go to the police, record the entire event. And I suggest 2 dictaphones, because if you don't have a phone on you, you can also put a dictaphone down and say, is it okay if I record it? And most likely if they're corrupt, they are going to say no. And then you're going to record it anyway with the other one, even if they confiscate the ones that you put there essentially as a trap, as a red herring, because that was what my phone was. It was a red herring. I said, can I record it? You know, and immediately I primed him to think I'm going to record it with my phone. And then he said, no, I put my phone away, thinking, yeah, let's see, it's going to be some bullshit, isn't it? But the point is, because we're dealing with police corruption, it is your right essentially to ensure that you are not being essentially, you know, subverted by a higher power. So record what you're saying. That's point number 1. Covertly record so that you can prove what happened. At the end of the day, these people are public servants. You're in a public place, and these are about high crimes, so you're entirely within your right, in my view. Then if you can use it in court or not, that's a different matter. But should someone attack you, you've got evidence, right? So that's it. And then, and even if it can't be used in court today, sometimes courts change their mind when they actually see the staggering amount of criminality, so don't despair about that. So number 3 also, anything you hand in, you only hand in as a copy, and you make backup copies of everything you hand in, and you keep them, ideally several, and you keep them in a safe place. You know, keep them in a safe place. If you put it in a bank safe, photograph what you put in a bank safe, and then have the photo multiplied and, you know, spread it around so that there are different hooks. If one bit is compromised, you've got different tentacles on it. You know, you can either prove that something has been modified, maybe something got stolen from your bank safe. I mean, even that in principle is possible, because the police can request access to your bank safe, but then you might have a photograph on your phone, a photograph somewhere in an online cloud about what you put into the bank safe. So, you know, spread it around a bit and have little hideouts for these things and duplicate. But the most important thing is keep copies and diaries. Okay? And number 4, after you've been there, request your crime report. You know, so request essentially to see what they have on you as well. Now I went to this, I had to go alone because I was alone in the UK at the time, but I did do the covert recording. I didn't give them copies of anything because, you know, it wasn't a case like that. But then when I requested my crime report, now they still haven't, you know, produced it. Greater Manchester's still sitting on it. So, you know, and already, if they don't give you the crime report, by the way, when you request it, do it in writing and keep a copy of the letter. And if you send the letter, send it as registered post. And check online that it has arrived. And when it has arrived, take a screenshot proving it has arrived and keep it with the receipt that you've posted it. So keep absolutely evidence about everything to do with them, you know, because essentially you have to prove crimes that they are committing. So you have to be like a super inspector, you know, you have to be like, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes or Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot or, you know, Inspector Clouseau. Pick your favorite detective and think about what would they do. So that's about the police. Now with doctors, I would almost recommend the same. Covertly record what they say to you, especially if your doctors are doing, you know, something that you might find malpractice. Then also request always to have a copy of your results, always. Keep a copy and duplicate that copy as well, spread it around into safe places. And essentially keep a tab on your doctors as well so that you can prove everything. So, and that's the one thing about approaching. And you're going to do the same thing essentially, the same cycle with whatever organization you're approaching. And this is about the hit list. So we're approaching now charities and, you know, heads of intelligence and so on and so on. And ideally you don't go alone. If you can help it, you don't go alone. You record every conversation covertly. It doesn't matter what the law says. For your private use, you can record it. And for your private protection, most certainly. And they record everything we say. Keep copies and then request reports, crime reports, doctors' reports. And if you're dealing with official organizations, request an FOI. You know, as soon as you go, I think you can request FOI as freedom of information. In those countries where you have freedom of information, you know, make it a habit that you go, you submit information to this, and then, you know, you immediately send an FOI request and you say how, you know, let's say you report microwave assaults, send an FOI straight away asking how many microwave assault reports did your institution receive in total, say over the last 5 years or something. Because if you've submitted one, there should be at least one. If it comes back with none, you know, the person dealing with FOI might be separate from the one handling your case, and allow enough time to actually, for this to percolate, you know, through the system. Then you know, hang on, there's serious cover-up. So essentially, try to have as many hooks on the system as you can and get information. So work with them, but keep them essentially in a headlock. You know, so whatever you tell them, you ask for a copy back. You know, you want to hear what they did. So this is how I would approach these. But then also remember my video from the recapturing organizations. The link is below. In the recapture, if you approach, let's say these are not family members. Let's say you went alone. You know, no one can join you on the day. Or let's say you went with your entire family members, but they still rejected you. We don't stop there. The next person comes along. find another victim in your region. If there's nobody in your locality, right, in the actual local area, get somebody else who knows about your case to call the police station separately. This is also, you don't have to physically go somewhere to essentially, you know, keep approaching the same person. What is also highly effective is maybe if somebody calls the police station at another, you were turned away, but your case is still under file. Well, if you're turned away, a day later, make somebody else call the police station, say another victim, and say to the police officer, did you know that these crimes are happening? I have heard that the victim approached you. What are you going to do about these crimes? That's almost like someone else approaching them, right? That puts, again, pressure. If they get turned away and they say, sorry, we can't say anything about the case, you say, okay, I just wanted to inform you that these microwave attacks are happening. Bye. And then the next day you get somebody else to do the same thing, or the next week. And the range for this, if you are targeting somebody on the hit list, even if you're alone, don't be alone overall. Prepare to have an amplification effect. If they turn you away, prepare to have essentially ammunition in the background to launch at them again, so that they literally have to keep bouncing people off. And by the time they had to bounce 2 people off, it's already much more powerful. You had an effect on them. You know, this person seriously starts thinking, hang on, why does my boss not allow me to deal with this? And they get very uncertain, you know, but you keep throwing stuff at them. And that's what you have to do, because ultimately you have to increase the pressure from this side towards essentially recapture, towards them becoming honest. This pressure has to be higher than the pressure from above, keeping a lid on this, keeping them in the cover-up. So to recapture this person, the pressure you apply by people keep going back and back and back has to be larger than this guy's meeting with his boss and his boss saying, no, we're still not dealing with that. Okay, so that is the plan. You have to understand that. That's what I mean with don't go alone. Even if you go alone, have an amplification effect. Okay, so that is very important. So hit list. So I'm going to wipe this so that I've got more space. But write this down. You know, I'll go back in the video. So approach the hit list. So number 1 was essentially the hit list. And then number 2, approach to have an amplification effect. Amplify. Amplify you approaching the hit list. And this can be done by victims and also others externally. In a sense, if you go and talk to a local police and they turn you away, there's nothing stopping me from calling them from Switzerland, even if you're in the US, and I say, oh, by the way, did you know it's an international problem? And then I can just say something. I can say, well, here in Switzerland, we're now really ramping up dealing with it. I think you should do the same in the US. And by the way, I know that in the UK, people are doing the same thing, so what are you going to do in the US? And suddenly, if someone else calls in, you have this massive amplification effect. And literally, typically, if say, imagine your local police chief in somewhere in the US, he just probably doesn't think further than his own state, right? If suddenly he gets an international call saying, so I've heard you turned the victim away, what are you going to do about it? This is, international importance, international investigations, how come he's still covering up? People literally shit themselves, typically. Because you suddenly think, oh my god, the entire world is watching. And by the way, this is exactly the effect that Amnesty International used, because the lawyer who first came up with the idea, the original idea of Amnesty International, who started Amnesty, he said, so the idea was someone was in prison, in an unjust fashion, and then you had to get the person out. And he said, it's much more effective if people from other countries write in to that country where this guy's in prison. They would typically target like heads, like prison heads and so on. And he said if other people from other countries start writing in, pleading for this guy, the head of a prison, say, would feel like the entire world is watching. So that has this huge, huge impact psychologically on people. And it shouldn't be underestimated, because even though Amnesty's processes were public, and people knew that this was happening, still when the letters start coming in and one prison head suddenly just sees, yes, literally, this extends from Japan all the way to the US, to Latin America, people know about it, everybody gets extremely uncertain. And then prisoners were actually freed. So this is the idea, but the idea behind Amnesty, but the same applies here as well. You can use this amplification effect, so amplify using other people, other people in other countries as well. Other countries, and I will say other contacts. Okay, so that's the way to do it. And then, once you're finished with this guy, you go one level up, and then you start targeting this person. You can send emails, you don't have to go into the organization. This is representing you descending down on his boss, all the way until this boss finally gives in and essentially is recaptured, and then you move off. And this person does whatever you want them to do, either record your crime report or do something for you, and so on and so on. And this is how bit by bit you turn people back to the rule of law. You essentially force them to work in a way that you would expect from the system. If you go to the police and you report a serious assault, you expect to be taken seriously. If they don't take you seriously, you have to work on them until they take you seriously. And you just start clawing back the system. And essentially what you're doing is restoring it to health. It's a process of recapture. So, hit lists. Don't go alone. Then the other thing is also, keep going back, you know. So even if this phase doesn't work, keep going back. Even if it's after a year, and then say, oh, I was here a year ago, it's still no better. If it was last week, last month, whenever it was, keep going back. And repeat the process. If this doesn't work the first time around, keep going back. And then refer to your previous stays there. Because, for example, Annie Kasper, she said, she listed a lot of things she did over the last couple of years when she started being targeted. And then she said, you know, first of all, that it didn't work. And then I would say, okay, Annie, now we go back. We do exactly what you did, you know, then. And we do it again. And now I'm doing it with you. I'm going to call literally every single place that you called from Switzerland, and I'm going to do it now with you. We're going to do the same thing again. You can send the same emails, the same documents. We're going to do it again, and now I'm going to add my voice. So I'm going to amplify what you did. We're going to have a rerun. We're going to amplify. Sorry, I should say also, if the amplify doesn't, you know, work, we're going to have a retry, and I'm going to amplify it, you know, as another voice from another country. And then she also said that when she approached certain charities and so on, some of them admitted they knew about it, and they told me, so Annie said, they told me, we just have to live through it, there's nothing we can do. And to that I would answer, we have to live through it? What has the world come to? Bullshit. We don't have to anything, especially not when it's about crime. So then we go back to exactly this person who said that, and we're going to work them. We're going to work them until they change their mind, because essentially this is classic. Well, it's the tactic of inert people, but it's also the tactic of corrupted systems, you know. They essentially, if you're here, or even if you're here, you're kind of stuck between, you know, corrupt people. If you're approached from outside and people start, you're on a hit list and people start descending down on you, what you want to say to them is go away, it's just that way and it will always be like that and there's nothing we can do. Just so that they don't have to go about, you know, up against, maybe even scarier people above them. But this is not what we stand for as society. Telling a victim, oh yeah, you know, someone just comes into your home every day and just punches you in the stomach whilst you're sleeping in your bed. And they do it like not just every night, they do it literally every 5 minutes. And you go to the police and they just say, sorry, you just have to live through that. No, I don't frickin' think so. I think you, officer, are gonna get on the case, and if you don't, it means you're not doing your job, so you should quit that job, or you should be quit from that job. That's what it means. So we're going back, and none of this like, oh, you just have to deal with it. Yeah, we had decades of that, and people dealt with it, and the problem just got worse and worse. Now, not just thousands, but by the sound of it, hundreds of thousands of people were targeted by essentially abject scum. Like by the dumbest people, we're going to be, you know, mucked around by the dumbest people in society? I don't think so. I think I spent far too much time in my life working really hard to just be essentially messed around by a bunch of like drug dealers and teenage kids. I don't think so. So we're going to go back, and do not be fobbed off with, oh, can't be done. By the way, this is actually very important as well. To listen carefully what they tell you, trying to intimidate you, and build up defenses against them. Because what we're going to do here is when we're retrying, with the retry, there has to be like in between the amplify. Actually, I should make this point 4, if you forgive me, because I left out one step. Because when you try, this is like, okay, you're approaching the hit list, you amplify it with other voices, and then number 3, so number 4 should be retry, but number 3 should be a learning process. So essentially, this is like study and map the system. And sorry, I'm not sure if you can read my handwriting. This is meant to read study and map. Study their practices and map out the system. So if somebody rejects you, you approach them, yeah, and they reject you, study with what precise mechanism they're fobbing you off. Study the mechanism. Because then when you go to the retry, you have already seen it before, and then you have something to counter that. If you go and they fob you off with mental health, or it must be mental health, okay, then somebody else comes back, and by the time they come back, by the time you reach the retry, you studied and you know that's what they're going to say, and then this person goes there with literally statistics. 70% of the victims are women. Mental health, so schizophrenia and paranoia, are 60% men. So 70% women, 60% men. Doesn't match. This explanation is out. Bye. Now you have to do something, you know. So you go back, and by the time you got to retry, you have mapped their methods. And the reason why this is really important, this studying, is because as you're going through this with the retry, what I want us to do is also build up essentially a protocol, you know. So even you retry, if it was successful, great. Even if it hasn't been successful, what you feed into is essentially build a protocol. Can you read this? Build a protocol. And the protocol is the procedure. You know, a protocol to follow when someone else, even if you get rejected, if someone else comes along, what's the protocol to follow? And the protocol, for example, would be step number 1 that they're going to do with you, and you have a list, your past wisdom, passed on to the next person. And you can literally, you can write it up in Word or something and have a PDF document where you give advice to the next person coming along. That's your protocol. So the protocol to approach the police is, you do this, like what I just said, don't go alone, take a dictaphone, record everything, just only give them copies, blah, blah, blah. And then the next step is the learning that you also put in, and it's things like, the first thing they will say to you is that you have mental health issues. And then the protocol is that to that we reply, no, that explanation is out, and now they really have to get going. And then you can also have the references. You say, our protocol is to give them these references to medical literature, which, by the way, you can find on Wikipedia, about the rates of schizophrenia and paranoia. If you're a female victim, that's like a, total dead in the water argument. But even if you're a male victim, you can say, well, what I'm reporting falls into a category where most of the people reporting it are 70% female. My profile matches that, not that of schizophrenia and paranoia. Plus, I also have this really technical, documentation as well. And then we're going to put in technical documentation as well. So the idea is to reach at the end, by the fifth step, a protocol, which you then pass on to somebody else. I'll try to write cleaner. Essentially, pass it on to somebody else. And then let's say you worked on your police department, say in your state, and somewhere nearby you know about another victim who's still fighting another captured police department. And then if you're finished here and you recaptured your police department and your case is now on the file, maybe they're helping you or maybe they admit that they're clueless, but at least they have your file recorded. You join another victim and you help them. You essentially help them in this process of going back. And sometimes you don't even have to travel to their state and go to the police station with them. You can do what I just said. Essentially, if this person gets turned away, you, from your state, make a phone call to that police officer saying, by the way, we in our state, we had the same problem. I'm also a victim, or maybe I'm an expert witness, whatever. What are you going to do about it? And then you essentially start pestering, you start essentially pinging the system, you start prodding the system, and you have to keep prodding it to apply enough pressure so that this guy eventually, one day, also flips back. And I know this process sounds very, very laborious, but honestly, trust me, it's not like that. It's really not as laborious as you think. Because by the time you worked on, let's say you work on this, you had a little success, and then the two of you start working on the police chief, eventually he might even hear from other police chiefs or might have heard something. He will flip quicker, and then by the time he flips, this person will also essentially stop being part of the cover-up. So actually, the more people you claw back into integrity and rule of law, the easier it will be. And essentially, once you have gone through this and you have literally heard all the nonsense that they try to throw at you, you have seen it all, you can prepare the next person will have an easier time, and it just goes from there. It is essentially like getting, like a steam engine going. The first bit until it gets going is very hard, and then once it's building up steam, it's essentially running under its own steam, and it's getting faster and faster, and it's easier to make it go faster beyond that point. So that's what I would recommend in how to approach hit lists, how to actually recapture the system. I also, the other thing is, yes, also the same thing applies to everything. I want to say two things. Sorry, I've got a long list of things I wanted to make. The one thing you have to remember is that don't get frustrated if you suddenly approach like a corrupt department and you get bounced off, and then maybe your friend gets bounced off as well, and they give you a lot of nonsense. Don't be frustrated, because essentially there, where the people still give you nonsense, is exactly the place where you have to work, where you have to apply your work and your effort. If you went to like a place and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll record this, yes, we'll do our best, and then you reach a level and they say, sorry, we can't help you any further. Well, this is easy. This is not where we have to do the work. We have to recapture this bit here. So in a sense, don't get frustrated, let's say. You have to keep in mind that essentially where you feel resistance is where you have to go, point number one. Point number two, remember this famous quote by the old, I think it was a Vietnam War veteran, he was a pilot, and he said, it's essentially know you're above the target when you take the flag. So when they start shooting back, you know you're going in the right place. So essentially keep that in mind as well. If suddenly your targeting intensifies, don't be scared off, because what it means is that people got really nervous and they want to stop you. And then you know, oh, I'm on the right path. And yes, they will increase the targeting maybe a little bit, but they won't, by the time you got going, they can't be too extreme, because then all hell will be raised. And I can tell you now, they are international efforts. So we are now in the end game. We're now wrapping this up. So don't be scared. Push against the resistance. And then also keep in mind that you are dealing with the empire of bullshit. So whatever they're going to throw at you will be bullshit. Okay, so if you get frustrated about, oh, how stupid they are and how nonsensical this is and so on, and why they don't send you the papers and why they keep bending every single one of their processes, it is because you're dealing with the empire of bullshit. So they will come up with any old bullshit. Yes, because that's what they do professionally, you know, maintaining precisely that sort of empire. So don't be offended, don't be upset, just take it really calmly like a lawyer and say, okay, well, okay, thank you very much for that response. Now, you know, how about this one? And you keep going and you keep cycling it, and meanwhile, you don't get upset. Okay, and then there's one more thing. Hang on. Yes, there's also, actually this is very, very important. What's very important is, first of all, also, that when you keep trying here, I would say, you know, build a protocol, pass it on, but this entire list, I would actually make it public. That's very important. Like I did. You know, ideally you make this entire, from the start you make it public. You make public, you know, what your hit list is, who you're going to target. You say, well, in my view, these people are responsible, these people should help me. You know, you publicly invite for help, support with that. Be careful, because the intelligence agencies are going to send stupid infiltrators who will just play the monkey, you know, play up, just to discredit you. So, you know, maybe at first you don't want to make it public totally. Maybe just, you know, make it public to the people you trust. Then, you know, study what the reaction is, retry with people you trust, build a protocol, pass it on, and maybe then make it public. And then say, you know, and then make everything public, the entire documentation. You know, black out your address, but then, you know, what district you live in is, or maybe, you know, even that. But if you're comfortable with that, at whatever level you're targeting people, you know, if you're comfortable with making it public, this is really valuable information, because then others can also refer to it. If you have success in recapturing somebody, people in captured states can say, yeah, but the other police officer already, you know, recognized this and stuff like that. But also, if you don't have success beyond a certain point of recapturing, make it public, because then essentially people from all around the world can start working on that point, and then we say, okay, now we are going to work until literally this person gives in as well. So make all your successes, but also all your frustrations public, and name names. In this case, name names. With public authorities, you can publicly name names and say, I think with my problem, this person should help me. So this is, make it public. And does it still fit? Because then you emphasize that people have a personal responsibility, an actual personal responsibility to help you, and that's very important, because they have exactly that. So just a second, let me just check. Another good tip when you're approaching people and you're telling them about lots and lots of things that happened, if you can prove them, another argument, which is essentially scientifically totally valid as well, say you have break-ins and then really weird health complaints, what you can also say is that, you know, if your doctors try to fob you off with really rare diseases, actually, in terms of scientific analysis, data analysis, it's also a valid argument to say, yes, but the compound probability, so the combined probability, is just far too unlikely. It is statistically far too unlikely, if not impossible, that all these rare things would happen to me over and over. For example, being the victim of a break-in is pretty unlikely, but then being the victim of a break-in, suddenly this, you know, developing a really weird disease that only exists in the fringes of the medical book. Okay, well, maybe you have that as well, but then developing these things, or this disease, whilst you have a lot of break-ins, that's really rare. You know, especially if you've got more than one break-in, or you've got a break-in and then something happens to your car, or like actual obvious tampering, and then you get, you know, gang stalking and people act weird. Or people sometimes do act weird just because. But if these things just amass, the more things they do to you, the more statistically unlikely it is to just happen by chance. And beyond a certain point, we can say, well, you know, we've got this class of people, and the totality of what happened to them is as unlikely as being involved in 2 plane crashes. You know, it's pretty unlikely. So, you know, there are some people who were involved in more than one plane crash. I think Ernest Hemingway, by the way, was one of them, as far as I know. So it does happen, but it's pretty unlikely. So with statistics, you can also say that, you know, it's impossible that all these things keep happening to you just by chance. There must be another mechanism. Okay, then actually 2 more points, and this goes. Hello, I'm Dr. Katherina Horton. I would like to finish off the video I just posted. This is still about how to pivot out of the how to pivot out globally out of the empire of bullshit. The previous video was cut off, and it was long enough as it was. So you know, but it's very, very interesting when these things happen. I think my videos are being watched live, and it seemed to be the case that literally the intelligence agency thought, right, you've been banging on for too long, we're bored, that's it. So what I would like to finish off with is a couple of things that I think you should know because essentially what I've shown you so far is just very general. It's about how to recapture a system that has just been captured by some way or another. Capture can happen by miscellaneous means, just through corruption, through psychopaths, monetary interests, ulterior motives, people who want other people harm, people who want to take over the company, many other things. And remember that actually capture, the only thing capture actually means is it has been captured by something. It's not working the way it should. So I use these diagrams to indicate what a captured organization looks like. There are always certain regions, certain domains where people work exactly like the organization should work. This is what I call a domain. And then there are also domains which are entirely captured. But capture just means that these units, these people inside the organigram, do not work the way you would expect them to work, given what it says on the tin, given what it says on the organization. So, for example, if you have a captured police force, let's say you have a captured officer, if he goes out and shoots somebody illegally, even though there wasn't a reason to shoot this person, well, that's capture. He could have been, in the moment, being captured by his own fear, captured by his own, let's say, racism. If he just, shot somebody from a minority and it turns out that, let's say, he's been involved with a right-wing organization and just hates foreigners. I mean, it has happened. I don't want to smear the police that this is what always happens, because you get the reverse as well. You get literally white police officers being turned on by gangs. But essentially in the full palette of everything that can go wrong. And I do not want to just smear the police specifically, because doctors get captured by the pharma industry. Doctors get captured by their own stupidity. In fact, I once asked this question of, in my video about capture, at the end I asked the quiz question, what do you think the most common form of capture is? And the answer is actually stupidity. It is just innocent, honest stupidity, incompetence. Because then it is almost, it is like capture, because you are caught up by not knowing, or just being frankly too stupid to do something. It does happen. It happened to me as well. Sometimes I was too stupid to do the things I had to do, and I just, I only noticed the one instances where I did discover, and I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I'm such an idiot. And then you correct your mistakes, but in that moment, you have not worked how you should have worked. So in a sense, inside the organigram, you did not what you should have done. And in most cases, it's pretty minor mistakes. You just miss a meeting because you forget about it. Well, this is not scary capture, but inside the organigram, you're already in that moment. You haven't acted how you should have and how you even intended yourself. But this is something to keep in mind also when you're recapturing a system, that sometimes people will not work the way they should because of other types of capture. It's not necessarily this big scary infiltration that I keep going on about that seems to come from the intelligence agencies and go into the military industrial complex using military weapons, go into healthcare. And yes, this is what you're trying to unravel, but every single time you approach somebody, you're not sure if they are part of the big, actual capture, or if it's just genuine, honest stupidity, or being tired, or having, a divorce proceedings in the background, or the cat died, or something. People sometimes don't act the way they should for many other reasons, and I want you to keep it in mind and essentially think like Sherlock Holmes, think like a lawyer, and an actual investigator, and do the forensics properly and ask yourself, could this have been just genuine ignorance, genuine not knowing, genuinely being fearful of doing something wrong? And keep that in mind, because if you start stomping on this person's head as if he was part of real capture, okay, you can still force him to do what he should do by going back and asking him to correct his mistake, but always essentially increase pressure gradually. Don't just stomp on people's heads. Okay, so I would like to finish off this entire series, and so now that you understood this, that there are these different forms of capture, when we're moving forward, we want to essentially tidy up this real capture coming from the top, and from what I can tell from the intelligence agencies. The fact that they are assaulting people with microwave weapons, seem to have tentacles in the pharma industry and the weapons industry, seem to try to read out people's brain prints, remote control them, which, as scary and as sci-fi it might sound, it is actually possible. So, sad to tell you, but this is real, and this is what we're trying to figure out. We are in a very special situation, because I'm now referring specifically to the intelligence agencies in this video. And it's because if you have capture through the intelligence agencies, which actually happens more often than you think, because they're a secret organization, because they do not have transparency. In fact, they're their own agents, so transparency means no one can look inside from the outside, so there are no corrective mechanisms from outside. On top of that, in the UK, for example, the agents are bound by the Official Secrets Act. In other countries, they've got equivalent things to gag their own people. So then the people can't go from the inside out either and notify others that something is seriously going wrong. And if you look at past whistleblowers and what horrific things seem to have randomly happened to them, then you also see what severe consequences there are. So this is a very, very, it is essentially because we have never looked into the intelligence agencies. If you open it, we get essentially just the horrors, not just that are currently being generated, we get the horrors integrated over all previous decades and even centuries that have been festering in this ancient, ossified, psychopathic, degenerate organization. Sorry, so that's just how it is. But now, if we're running the program of recapture and we have intelligence agency involvement, it's essentially even harder. It's one layer up. So what I've shown you here is the process you would run to recapture an organization if it was, maybe the boss turns out to be corrupt or, having some little, side business and so on. That's minor. When you have infiltration and capture by a government secret service, or as I put it now to you is the case here, which is essentially an internationally networked conglomerate of intelligence agencies that act like as if they were one intelligence agency, you are up against essentially the hardest thing you can do in your life. So not many people enter this, happily or willingly. I got dragged in because they started, and they still are, shooting into my head with microwave weapons. They're beaming my head as I speak. This is why I sometimes lose the thread. Sometimes I slow down. I've got blurry vision as I speak to you because they're also radiating my head. They are doing essentially non-stop things. So even though I seem functional, I'm actually under a huge load. I can barely concentrate. I've got this beam coming into my head and a beam from this side here. And it's very, very confusing. They seem to be irradiating me with two different beams. Ah, so this is what we're dealing with. I'm trying to pull through this video. And now let's talk about how special the situation is and what extra layers do we have to, what extra things do we have to do in this very special situation of tackling essentially the intelligence agencies. We need some essentially special effort, special tools, because these guys work with special tools. These guys are professionals in essentially sabotage, infiltration, deception, and assassination. Yay! And these are the guys we're up against. So, of course, what you expect is a lot of infiltration, sabotage, deception, and some assassinations. And maiming as well, as a precursor to assassination. So I myself, I had an assassination attempt. I have non-stop maiming with microwave weapons. I had hacking. My websites got hacked. My email was taken offline for 2 weeks or even longer when I was preparing my court case. So this is serious shit we're dealing with. So I need you all to be on the ball, and we need to have certain mechanisms put into place to have this shut down. Because essentially, because of the Official Secrets Act, because of a lack of transparency, and because of, frankly, an overbearing load of male arrogance, sexual aggression, general machismo, dominance, threats, and all that, the intelligence agencies have never been tidied up, and they got worse and worse and worse and worse in every country. Not just the UK and Germany and Switzerland, which is where most of my problems are, but in all countries. I don't know a single country where you will find people talking really positively about the highly intelligent, people in the intelligence agencies doing stuff of glowing integrity all the time. It just doesn't happen. And that's because if you have a secret system, it always ends up in deep capture by psychopaths, essentially, and criminals. There's no other way. Pyramid organizations, as actually a very intelligent man called Paul Marco just put it to me recently in my interview with him, which I shall post. He said pyramid organizations are psychopath magnets, and that's exactly the conclusion I came to, because it's essentially deep capture is the end state. Capture occurs naturally in all systems, and the higher the pyramid, essentially the thicker the layer in the end of captured people and budding psychopaths trying to get to the top. But these psychopaths essentially always just climb to the top. So essentially the concentration of psychopaths increases towards the top naturally. You can stand on your head and spin around trying to avoid that, but this is what these systems essentially will tend to naturally. You can write a computer simulation mapping this out and you will come to the same conclusion. So, pyramid organizations are essentially psychopath magnets. And I should say Paul Marco was an organizational psychologist and with several decades of experience, so he knows what he's talking about. We're totally on one page on this, so now what are we going to do with regards to the intelligence agencies? And here it is. The 2 points I wanted to make last time that I got cut off from is essentially that we have to essentially, when we start working, incorporate the specific situation that we are dealing with: professional saboteurs, con artists, and assassins. Right? This has to be incorporated. We shouldn't be surprised that we'll be hit by, essentially mutilation, targeted sabotage, and an awful lot of deception. That's just part of the deal. So we have to be treading very carefully, making sure we know what we're talking about, because there will be deception. And every single time we get it wrong, it's natural that you will get some things wrong, because they're throwing bullshit at you left, right, and center. And if you then step on bullshit or take it in and you say, oh, I think it's this way, and actually it's just deception, they'll go, ha 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 ha, you don't know what you're talking about. Or ha 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 ha, you're mad. It is childish. It's absolutely idiotic and degenerate, but hey, yeah, we're dealing with the empire of bullshit, so, right, we're not going to expect, Nobel Prize winning output from this sort of organization. So that's what we're dealing with. How to get around that? Well, first of all, expect infiltration. Whoever you're dealing with could be infiltrated. Of course, you're watching this and you think maybe she's infiltrated, and I try to show you that if you're really worried, you can call my college, you can look at my past results, right? You can look at what I'm putting out and convince yourself that really I was a research fellow at St. John's College, Oxford. Yes, I really had a court case. You can find the court papers on my website under court cases. I really did go to the High Court. You can find the transcripts, you can find the judgment, you can make up your mind. This is all real. By the way, I'm also working with the High Court to actually have my court case and the judgment published, because you can't search it online. Last time I checked, I couldn't find it online, but I emailed the High Court, as well as requesting the audio recordings for my hearings, because the transcript has been tampered with, and I can show that that's the case. But they didn't get back to me yet. This is all part of, tidying this stuff up. So expect infiltration and double check. Now, it's very hard. I found it very hard to know who's really an agent and who isn't. It takes some time. Sometimes they make howling mistakes. Sometimes they literally jeer and laugh in your face, and then it's pretty easy, right? But sometimes they're more subtle. And I found that with most infiltrators, they will give you stuff that's true intermixed with bullshit. I mean, they're agents of bullshit, so they will have to give you some bullshit, right? That's the product they produce. Now, what you can do is flip out and go, oh my God, I've just been bullshitted, when you discover, like, oh my God, you can't do anything because you're infiltrated all the time. Well, that's a very, you get back to zero, and that's what they want. Instead, one better way is to say, I now found out this person is an agent. Now let's go back and let's see, how did he do it? How did he trick me? Did he try to look like someone I like? Did he try to talk like someone I like? Did he try to emulate something I was doing at the time? And if this was pulled off in a way that matched something that you were searching online, that's evidence for GCHQ style infiltration. Note it down, write it down, make it public, and say, this is the evidence I've got. To me, it looks like this. If this is really the case, then this means this, 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 and this, and make it public, broadcast it, because then bit by bit, we learn the tricks of these shysters. Sorry about my language, but that's essentially what it is. I really want to call a spade a spade. This is essentially just subverting people who are desperately fighting for their lives in case of crimes against humanity. It doesn't get lower than that, So, doesn't matter. You take the good bits, and then you say, oh, he actually told me this, which turned out to be true. Then he told me, or she told me that, and it turned out to be a lie. Remember, there might be someone who's also genuinely just misinformed in society. They might have been bullshitted by another agent in turn. But don't worry, because the longer you are in this game, the longer you are in this game, the more you will actually learn how to go about doing this, And also remember, we also try to uncover who these bullshitters are. And once you have their face, don't worry, they're still going to stay on planet Earth, and our society is just going to get ever more transparent. So whatever, nonsense they do, it's going to stick to them forever. So from now on, the intelligence agencies have to get used to that. They have to up their game, right? They really have to start cooperating and cut the bullcrap, because any bullcrap will stay stuck to a certain person. So, what to do? So, when you're infiltrated, don't panic. Sieve it, what was true, what wasn't, and then go back and find out, how did they bullshit me? And learn, and make it public. If you don't want to name names because you feel like it might be libel, I mean, you can always say, and that's the truth, right, that my impression is allegedly da-da-da-da-da, right? As far as I can tell, based on what I have seen, I would say da-da-da, my opinion is, or I was led to believe that da-da-da, yeah? That's not a libel case, that's just saying the truth, right? If you say, I am 100% sure that this person is that, you better have some evidence, right? But it's still about public disclosure, so there are things you can say. Do not fall for this thing that the lawyers are also trying to put out, especially the lawyers of the empire of bullshit, like you're not allowed to say anything unless you have ultimate proof. No, you can say a lot of things, and you have to essentially also give other people circumstantial evidence, like what happened to you. All the other things that happened to you are essentially telltale signs of how the system works. So we need all that. Do not be scared by infiltrators, expect them, study their methods, and make it public. Okay, and in fact, I also put the idea out, to the people who contacted me, that maybe we should all just have, in the end, literally just broadcast. You know how you have online videos, people who are dissecting false flag operations, when the state pulls off essentially terror attacks and other attacks to spoof, to scare the population, to then pull off some political nonsense. Well, if you don't know what a false flag is, just type it into Google or YouTube and then look at the documentation, because there's some excellent material put out, and you'll very quickly learn what a false flag is. But essentially, with the intelligence agencies, it's that sort of deception. They will pull off false flags in the victims' lives. They will infiltrate. They'll try to deceive, and and we have to learn how they do it, and we have to expose them. Do not be scared. Expect it. And essentially, what I also would like to say about this is that yeah, I think that the second point, actually the second point was about amplify your impact. You know, I mean, previously in the previous video I said if you're approaching a corrupt unit or one that you think that you're corrupt, don't approach it alone, approach it ideally in a group. And if you're not all together at the same time in the same office, it doesn't matter. Oops, one magnet stopped working. If you're not all together in one group, doesn't matter. You can also be in a group if you are approaching the same unit one after the other. You know, maybe with the same complaint until they give in. So that's the thing, amplify your effect, but also you can amplify it by just putting it out publicly, making it public, and say, I have experienced this. You know, always try to get an amplification effect. People will see your videos, people will see your YouTube videos. And remember, your views and your followers on Twitter, on YouTube, and many others do not necessarily reflect reality, right? That we know. That we know. Really, there's ways to check that, and I'm 100% certain that certainly YouTube views are not any reflection of reality at all. And there's ways you can check. You expect a certain turn-on curve, and if something is really going up and then suddenly it stops and the view count stays the same, and you know it kind of goes up exponentially and then it kind of goes flat, you think, no, this is not the natural. This is not how our natural system actually acts. So there's many ways to do that, and people have shown that in the past. So get over that. It's part of the deception. It's part of the bullcrap. And if you're actually trying to change something and go up against crime, you will be hit in the face with even more bullcrap. But that's to be expected, not to be to get upset about. So amplify your effect. But now I would like to dedicate another 5 minutes about the actual study. Study their methods. And this is really important, because remember that there's only a very limited number of ways that people can be subverted and bullshitted. I mean, at first the possibilities seem endless, but then some are really expensive, some are too crazy. In a subtle way, there are only, you know, so many things. And then also the toolbox of the intelligence agencies is limited. I mean, this is a profession that has been around since forever, right? So they pass on their own knowledge, but at the same time, right, it's not exactly rocket science. You know, I mean, I still have to see the Nobel Prize for the biggest con artist, you know, I mean, yeah, magicians have been around, con artists have been around, but the ways they can find, you know, it's just limited. They can use modern technology. So but even that's limited, right? And especially with modern technology, what a lot of people don't realize is that whatever you do in these complex computer systems that we have these days, even if you hack something and you go into a database, because of the interconnectedness, there are traces everywhere. And essentially, the more you do, the more traces there are, okay? All the time. And there are log files and things that can be accessed where literally technicians try to make sure that the systems work. And essentially, they keep pinging the system. They keep pulling data from the system just to ensure it works normally. So if there's a hack attack, it will show up in even those files. So if you want to have a real hack attack that where you just hide that it happened and who did it and when it happened and where it came from, that's extremely hard. That's even for a nation state. It takes like decades of actually studying what they want to hack, how they want to pull it off, you know, and it's too much. So when you're talking about just the random crap of the empire of bullshit that they throw into your face, especially if it's digital, don't worry. If it's digital, you just say, great, you know, any evidence, website hacking, email hacking, funny emails, spam emails that essentially are commentary on your life. Keep those, print them off, keep them, log them, database them, burn them on CD. Keep the evidence, right? Because we know this is happening. Essentially, leaked documents for GCHQ have already documented that they put a lot of effort into, what was it again? Deny, degrade, destroy, what is it, 5Ds, 3Ds? I have no idea, but it was basically this. It's essentially just cock things up. Well, thank you, GCHQ. It's not like, you know, this would be actual criminal sabotage, right? And these people do it before somebody was accused of something and went through a court case. So essentially, we already know we have GCHQ and the same for the NSA, right? So loose cannons just running around like a bunch of morons, denying people access or taking, you know, things offline and degrading and destroying. I mean, that's amazing. You know, that's really good. It must be awesome to live in to work in those companies and just like work on essentially degeneration. Yeah, so we know that this crap is going on, and victims like myself, we have experienced this full blast. But doesn't matter. The more shit they do, the more evidence we have, and this is how we're going to ratchet forward. So study their methods, and then especially remember, it is a two-way street. Even if you have brain interference, like they do it with me, and they have stalking and infiltration, and they try to get into your medical care and sabotage you, and I had doctors trying to intimidate me and mock me, literally in the most personal sort of situation that you can have. This guy's just going on about, you know, what nationality am I and where my parents came from, and, you know, where was I born, where were my siblings born, and what nationality, This is not really what a doctor should be doing, and this guy spent like 10-15 minutes just going on. Meanwhile, having a big jeering grin on his face. And what nationality are you, being one of these like harassment triggers that have been used by MI5 like over and over and over and over. And the idea is for you to get disconcerted. But instead, you just say, hang on, it's a two-way street. You give me bullshit, but immediately I've got a handle on your neck, And I know that that doctor, for example, is an agent of the empire of bullshit. Wicked. They have just exposed themselves. Collect the names. If you have good evidence, name names. If you don't have evidence or you're not comfortable, name what has been done to you and how it has been done to you. You know, do all that, expose them, take it that it's a two-way street. The same with the gang stalkers. Photograph them. Freaking photograph them. And also what you can do, and you know, this is, I asked a lawyer in Germany, I said, am I allowed to photograph my stalkers? And she says, yeah. I think in Germany, I have to remember which Bundesland it was. In the case of especially stalking, there was a judgment saying that yes, it is allowed to photograph people in the street, even specifically because you know, stalking is so sophisticated and so hard for the victim to prove that they do need these extra means. And if you have photographic evidence in a German court, yes, that is, you know, certainly. I think that was a Landesgericht, like a state court that decided that. So there are these cases, and judges are not all captured and crazy, you know. So it is okay, even to use that evidence in court in Germany in the case of stalking. As far as I know, this is a court case I definitely remember. But specifically, my German lawyer also told me, yes, you can photograph outside unless you're photographing women up the skirt or down their cleavage or some absolutely inappropriate stuff like that. If you're just taking normal photographs, it is okay. And also, right, because your stalkers keep changing, no one can accuse you that you stalked somebody and photographed the same person 16 times, right? That's the beauty of it. They use these centralized stalking networks so that we don't have the evidence, but in reverse, you can photograph their faces because you're never going to see the same person again, right? So just photograph them. And why should you photograph them? And I tell you why. It's because already Facebook has face recognition, right? Sometimes like names pop up for a person who appears in a video, you know. I've heard about, actually, if they have been tagged in another video, the name appears automatically. So imagine, this is again free face recognition that comes with your software, with Facebook, sorry, for free. Now this sort of face recognition, I tell you, will be made even more public. You know, as our privacy gets peeled back, the privacy of these bloody stalkers get also peeled back. And the more information they make public, the more information we have on their bloody agents from the empire of bullshit. And then you can literally just upload a page. I'll predict this now. You will be able to upload a picture to a page, and the software will determine who this is. So just get the evidence now. You have the rest of your life and all technological advances that are coming in the next year to use the evidence. So collect it now. The same with voice samples. Did you notice how all the banks started changing from this, if you want option blah blah, press 3. Instead, some of them don't even allow you to press anymore. Some say you can say the number 3, others say just press 3. But I have now seen banks which don't even give you the option to press 3. You have to say 3. Why do they do that? Because pressing 3 was so easy. It's because they're collecting your voice samples. It's for security. If the same person calls, you can, from their voice print, recognize if this is the account owner. It's to combat fraud. But banks, as we know, also have side businesses, and what they're doing is essentially assembling huge voice print databases. Can't be helped. That's just what they do. Okay, we can get upset about that, or else we can say, wicked! So at some point, I can upload a video to, you know, whatever, spybook.com later on, and then literally the software will, based on the voice print and the face print, tag this person, you know, or you just hear an audio sample with people in the background, and the software will say who this person is who's speaking. I predict that this is the future. I can already see the development. Don't have to wait for long. I think it's less than 10 years, and we'll have this stuff. So get the evidence now. These are crimes against humanity. These are domestic terrorism programs based on the Stasi-Zersetzung, based on COINTELPRO. This is utterly illegal. It's destroying lives. It's destroying people's psychological well-being. Get the fuckers. I'm sorry about the language, but that's just what we're dealing with. So audio samples, photographs, everything you can gather, say it's a two-way street. So you're giving me bullshit? Wonderful, it's a two-way street. Let's just get some information from you and keep going, right? Don't get upset, just go wicked. So that's very good. Now, another thing is, remember, whatever somebody does, it leaves traces. So whatever bullshit they do, it leaves traces. And it gives away what bullshit they do, how they did it, and what the purpose is, okay? It always is given away. And you have to all now switch to become forensic experts, okay? And I'm going to tell you a couple of things that you should also watch out for, especially when you're dealing with the intelligence agencies, because they are essentially professional con artists, right? And assassins, professional saboteurs, con artists, and assassins. So you better be careful, better keep your eyes open, and better get all the freaking data from these guys you can get. So, another thing that's very, very good is if you get spam mail that seems to be addressing your personal life situation. So I told you that there's, I should make a specific video about these court cases, but there is a court case called Philip Kerr versus MI5, which started as Philip Kerr versus Attorney General in the High Court and was heard in February 2015. Now, with Philip Kerr, I spoke to the guy after his second hearing in front of the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, and he also mentioned that he received essentially spam mail that was commenting on what he was doing. The one thing that I remember from my discussion is that he was getting in touch with lawyers, and he started getting spam mail where essentially, one spam mail was just suddenly making adverts for like steam generators, like hot steam generators or something like that, implying that the lawyer who'd encouraged him and said, yes, I really think you've got a valid case, was just pumping hot steam. So yes, this crazy shit does happen, and I think that particular incident was submitted to the High Court and to the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. So yeah, and for example, I went, before I was preparing this court case, I went back, and also whilst I was preparing the High Court case, I fled to my parents' home. I fled home because the attacks on me were so intense. And in both cases, literally the day I flew out, I got the same email, and it said, I think that one was a GMX account, and it seemed to be a GMX like recommendation, but first of all, these GMX recommendations, I just like never got, and then got, several in a very like dense period, and then they stopped. So, and this wasn't even a GMX recommendation. This was just protect your loved ones today. Oh, what an odd email. Protect your loved ones today. And I'm literally fleeing my home, and I'm going back to my parental home, to my loved ones, right? And I thought, no, it's coincidence. I couldn't even be bothered to open the email, like whatever. Then a month later, again, the attacks are so heavy, I have to flee the home again. I book my flights, which of course the intelligence agencies can see what day you're traveling because they've got access to all the databases. And the day I'm flying out again, I get the same email, protect your loved ones today. Coincidence? Well, I am actually flying out to, yes, protect them, to actually tell them what's happening to me and protect myself as well, right? And then I get this, and yes, I was assaulted on the airplane as well, and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, all these things happen. But this stuff about being sent spam emails, that's just like for GCHQ, which is so easy, right? They don't even have to hack anything. They just send you an email with a fake header. And I got emails with fake headers as well. Sometimes to my own email address. And sometimes I received emails in my inbox which were sent to another email address. And then that email address that they were addressed to had some special meaning. Sorry, my head is being cooked as I'm talking. So I'm encouraging you to take everything they serve you and study it. For example, not just emails, look at my YouTube page and look at the comments on my YouTube page. Have a look. Because, for example, there was one when I said in a video, does anybody know what frequencies they use to attack us? What are these? Does anybody have any internal knowledge? And I got a YouTube comment that was very detailed, like, oh yes, they're using these frequencies, like saying very specific frequencies with I think 1 decimal place or something like that. Of course I'm going to read it. So I expanded the comment, and then the question was, does swimming help? That's a really odd question. If you can see that comment, it's unless it gets deleted as soon as I say this, right? It's still online. And does swimming help? Well, they could have said, does playing golf help? Or does like aluminium help? Or does like iodine help? But instead this message is very detailed and does swimming help? And what it had to do with is that essentially I haven't left the house, working flat out, trying to put together my evidence, trying to find out who to talk to. I've been working flat out, and then I left the house once for like leisure time relaxation, and I went swimming. And I was stalked all the way there. In fact, I was irradiated, I believe also in the swimming pool, to my head, because at some point I literally felt like I can't breathe. And I had to get out of the pool before I drowned. That's very unusual for me. And then I was microwaved in the changing cabin, so I had to leave. And then I was microwaved all the way home in the car. So I know that the intelligence agencies have been abusing me and assaulting me when I went swimming. They certainly knew I went swimming because I'm being kept under surveillance 24/7. But then for them to watch my video and then pretend they know what frequencies they are. Maybe they're even true. Heck knows, maybe that's like part of it is true, and because they posted there, I can't believe that it's true, and therefore I'm not going to take it seriously. And then they put in, does swimming help? As in like, we watched you go swimming. You are, when you're dealing with the intelligence agencies, very quickly you will have the impression you're dealing with a bunch of dumb children. Like brutish, utterly thick children. If you have that impression, that's a telltale sign you're dealing with intelligence. Ironically named intelligence. You're dealing with the secret services. Like utterly, I can't describe to you. In the end, I should make my whole public, the evidence I submit to a court public, just like Philip Kerr did, and then you can see the details of what exactly has been happening to me. But literally, that was the sort of stupidity that I'm dealing with non-stop. So if you want to have a look, that's what to look for. Yeah, this level. If you think this is like, oh no, it can't be. No, it can be. I'm telling you, this is exactly what to look for. So the other thing is, the other way to tell that you're dealing with harassment from an agent is, remember, even these videos where I'm trying to systematically explain stuff to you, I am still being shot in the head with microwave weapons. After a year of harassment, I managed to actually cope, and I can sometimes even talk in full sentences whilst my head is being cooked. It took some training to do that, because most of the time you kind of just slow down. So if I talk too slow, it's because my brain keeps correcting for essentially non-stop continuous brain damage through intensely, incredibly painful microwave radiation coming from my next door neighbors. Not from satellites, none up here, it's coming from the side and from that side. I'm trying to block it out, but it's not always possible. Okay, so you're dealing with the videos of an abuse victim, essentially live. Would you then write like stupid comments and like derogatory comments? Of course not, unless you're totally sick in the head. You wouldn't get to that stage. I mean, you wouldn't get to listening to my videos to this stage, and you wouldn't put really negative comments. So when people do, it means that they are agents, right? So now go through my YouTube videos and look at all the comments with jeering, with threats, with physical threats. Over Twitter, I just got a, oh, that was priceless. People told me over YouTube that they're distributing flyers in the UK, and you can see that comment online. And then over Twitter, I got a tweet that also was online, but was taken then offline, and it said, "Are you? Is it your stupid flyers that are that I found on my windscreen or something like that? If you touch my car again, I'll break your legs." I'm like, I'm not even in the UK. I'm in Switzerland, so I can't be distributing flyers in the UK even if I wanted to. So I'm like, hey, I'm not distributing flyers. What's your problem again? And this and then you look at the account. It has very few tweets, very recent. Yeah, it could be someone who just doesn't really tweet very much, which is why the only time they seem to come online is to just say ridiculous threats. I mean, would anybody actually get on Twitter when you get a fly on your car? Most people just rip it off and throw it on the ground, as I've seen. No one's like, oh, hang on, let's just get my phone out, unlock, load Twitter, right? What's it says on the flyer? Okay, I'm so pissed off about having a piece of paper on my car. I'm literally going to go through this. Okay, hang on, let's just type it in. What sort of account is it? Oh, yeah, okay, let's now tweet and send it straight. Bollocks. Really? I don't think so. I think the guy was just an agent. Unless he's utterly thick, right? I mean, it could also be someone who's genuine. I mean, as I said, sometimes you have people who are not part of, international corruption. They're literally just genuinely thick. It could be someone who's just genuinely that fucking stupid. But then it was priceless because, someone else said, oh, I hope someone took a screenshot from this because the person has just deleted the tweet. Because I tweeted back, oh, well, I'm not distributing flyers, but thank you for sending an actual physical threat to an account that must be monitored by, I think, most intelligence agencies in the world, right? So most law enforcement they should be freaking watching my Twitter now because I keep sending messages to them. So you actually send a physical threat. I mean, that's hilarious. And then I said, by the way, I mean, this is what you just did. And then that tweet got deleted. And then someone else said, oh, I hope someone took a screenshot. And then I tweeted the screenshot. So you can see that genuinely happened and that this person genuinely sent a physical threat to me. Was he an idiot? Was he an agent? I don't know. But if this happens to you, please do the same. Take a screenshot, say, by the way, I'm a victim of the intelligence agencies. The intelligence agencies are monitoring this. You're either an idiot or you're an agent, but either way, any physical threats will be appearing in my court case because we don't know. We don't know who you are. So you, my friend, might end up on the charge sheet of MI5, right? Because I'll say to them, listen, I find it unlikely that someone gets a fly on their car and then tweets the shit at me. So I'm much more tempted that this is an MI5 account, or a fake GCHQ account. So that's what's going to happen, but throw this stuff back at them. Remember, it's a two-way street. Whatever crap they give you, throw it back. Find the clever ways to really make it embarrassing for them. Especially when you're a victim of the intelligence agencies, you've got all the license in the world, right? Throw it back at them. That's one thing. The other thing is go through my YouTube and please do this as an exercise and a study of the empire of bullshit. And I should make a dedicated video about symbolism. Please go through and look at all the accounts that have references to the all-seeing eye, to death, to murdering people, to harming people, to torturing people, or coercing people. Just go through, either in the picture, or in the header picture, or in the little blurb, or in any other messages that they actually put in. Just go through, because from that you can see, I mean, just like, it's very easy to just scroll down and see all the accounts that have just one eye staring, so like the all-seeing eye, Yeah, these are agent accounts, because the all-seeing eye, right, it's even in the MI6 logo. It's like, you've got the crown, and then at the top you've got the all-seeing eye. So the all-seeing eye is an intelligence agency symbol, right? And I took you to the website of the Investigatory Powers Tribunal as well. The website is www, please open a tab, Control-T, and check it for yourself right now. It's www.ipt-uk.com. Enter. Look at the site. On the front page, last time I checked a few days ago, in the first third of the website, the first thing you see is a big fat eye, one single eye. And yes, you say, oh, spying, an eye. But The MI6 logo is not just the eye, you know, it's the all-seeing eye and the triangle and the pyramid, right? The pyramid being like this, the organization, no pyramid, but they are supposedly at the top, right? And as we know, and as Paul Marco said, pyramidal organizations are psychopath magnets. So it's like, yeah, hey, it's the psychopath club. Are you in the club? If you see the all-seeing eye, you can assume that's the intelligence agencies. It's just the bullshit they're using, okay? It's just like for them, like insider signals of, oh yeah, you know, this is it. Then other ways to check this, and I should also go into the video about symbolism. The all-seeing eye will appear in different, you know, forms. Sometimes it's in the shape of a galaxy that looks like an eye. Sometimes it's like, oh, the other thing that they love is like crop circles, because why crop circles can be used with electromagnetic weapons on satellites, and you can burn out these. This is why these are really geometric patterns, because from space, you know, a little laser just like carved it into the crop. So you're burning the crop, right? You're burning the this thing, and it just drops off, right? It either breaks off or it actually just dies. The plant dies. So crop circles can be literally carved into space. You know, I mean, God. Anyway, but crop circles showing an eye or some eye-like structure, that's also intelligence agencies. Okay. The other thing is references to the London Eye. I mean, it's a freaking Ferris wheel, right? But it's called the London Eye because it's like a big eye, and it's meant to be staring at Parliament, like, ooh, you know, you've got like MI5, MI6, the all-seeing eye. Maybe it's the other way around. No, I think it's MI5, MI6, and then the all-seeing eye. You know, all around the Parliament in the UK, and you've got the all-seeing eye, or this like round wheel, you know, you can climb on for a lot of money. You can go in and be taken up and, you know, see London from above. Beautiful. I did that once with guests, you know. But it costs a lot of money. And then you are in the eye, the London Eye, staring at Parliament, watching them. You know, and by the way, there's also has been uncovered that parliamentarians have been snooped on by GCHQ, I think. I think that's even in The Guardian on the Independent, so Telegraph, check it out. So that's the shit we're dealing with. It is essentially just like, isn't it just so frickin' enough? But oh yes, another thing to watch out for is the number 7. The number 7, that's also an intelligence agency, empire of bullshit conglomerate signal, like the magical 7. By the way, you can also Google Christine Lagarde numerology or Christine Lagarde number 7, and you can see a speech by Christine Lagarde, how she's going on about numerology skills and the magical 7. If you think that's bullshit, you can safely assume that Christine Lagarde must therefore be an agent of the empire of bullshit. And if you want to have the anti-thesis, you could go to Karen Hoodus, you can follow her on Twitter at Karen Hoodus, and then you can find out what she thinks about all this and what sort of bullshit she's trying to unmask. But yeah, this is essentially it. So it goes into finance, it goes into the intelligence agencies, and literally meanwhile, people, I'm not, you know, working in finance, I didn't ever try to expose corruption, I'm all about making systems better, but I'm being mutilated to death in my own home. And meanwhile, people send me, like, you know, symbols of the all-seeing eye, and ooh, the magical number 7, and da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, yeah, just check them out. Literally, just check them. Please check them out yourself. You can go to any of my videos, look at the comments, and that's why I leave all the comments up. All the comments. I think I deleted one comment that was so vulgar. I was like, no, I just don't even, this is just too low, you know, we don't have to go there. You know, there's also like the human dignity. The right to human dignity is essentially, you know, a universal, unalienable right. It applies to me, but it also applies, more importantly, it applies to any other victim who reads this and sees this shit. But when you read my page, don't just like believe everything that they say. Think for yourself, is this guy an agent? You can call them out if you like, but then it will lead to like bullshit wars. You don't even have to call them out. You can just study their methods, make a little collection, and for your own evidence to be used in court, say, well, you know, Katherina Horton, she gets these messages with this symbolism, the all-seeing eye, magical number 7, and the 7 will appear in email addresses as well. So intelligence agents have like this thing about 7, and I tried to figure out, I asked one, who's actually a whistleblower, and I said, what is this thing about the 7? And I was told, oh, it's about levels. There are 7 levels. Okay, well, yeah, you can probably stagger them, you know, because the intelligence agencies have only this like need-to-know policy and Official Secrets Act. I mean, they probably can't tell their head from their elbow most of the time, you know, so if you tell them, ooh, there are these levels and just keep working yourself up, wonderful, bullshit from the empire of bullshit. So apparently there are levels, and I don't know, does it mean like if someone has 1 7, they are below the people with 2 7s, and if it's 7 7 7, it's like the head of the intelligence agencies, or what? I don't know. It's too bullshit for me to actually even want to get into. It's like essentially brainwashed by psychopaths to brainwash other stupid people. That's how I can say, you know, tell it. At CERN, we certainly didn't have like fucking numerology, and we didn't organize ourselves into freaking levels. In fact, all scientists did their own thing, and we were collaborative in a flat hierarchy, and no one could tell anybody what to do. You know, if they tried, they were told to, you know, And that's how we worked, and we certainly didn't. And no, we are not, opening special portals and shit like that. No, we're not. We're actually doing really boring stuff and hard, like statistics and data analysis, and that's what I used to do at SAN and so on. It was, a lot more low key, but we certainly didn't have bullshit. In fact, all of us have like an allergic reaction to bullshit, and I most certainly, I almost develop a rash when I have to read my own YouTube web page. And these poor children, most of them, remember, like teenagers and early people in their young 20s, and they are so brainwashed. You can see like how proud they are, just like, yay, I'm on level 7, or I reached my first 7, or so if you see I don't know, like if you get in a website of I don't know, the I 777, you know what you're dealing with. So that bull crap is also part of the empire of bullshit, unfortunately. Keep your eye, but again, study them. Study what they say, because once you know it's coming from the I and it's coming from someone who's 777, just have a look what they say. Because another thing, and this is also really important, so write it down. And by the way, my videos are really long, but essentially I have to get it all out before I get assassinated, yeah? So that's why I put in contents, and I hope GCHQ doesn't go through or the NSA and actually just hack them and screw them up for you. So if you go through the contents and you click on the number, it should jump in the video to where I'm talking about this, okay? So that's why, these videos are really long. You can pick what you want to hear. The other thing, what was I about to say? Threads going during, I just lost the thread. Study, I actually lost the thread. It happens sometimes. We had the numerology, we had the threads. What else happens to you? Yeah. I think this is what I wanted to say. If you go today, or now, to my website, and you go to the video, actually this is really good, to give you one example, right? I'll give you examples of what I mean. And this is how you have to kind of work out, are these people for real? Or are these people part of the, are these people actually genuinely, and yes, exactly, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to reply to 2 comments that are on my website, right? As examples of how you have to be maybe careful, and how maybe somebody could be an agent or maybe definitely is an agent. So, okay, please go on my YouTube page, and I'll try to find it. So if you go to my YouTube page now, and you click on the video, which is Stop 007, and then how to recapture the system in the global pivot, so how to recapture the system. And you look at the comment by Willow Fine Arts. He says, maybe we should call ourselves something with initials that represent all that are targeted, some anti-intelligence movement. How about the Trojans 171717? Now that contains 777, right? And now at first you could think, okay, maybe this guy is an agent, or else, he is somebody who knows about numerology, who knows about this bullshit symbolism, and is taking the mickey out of that, So the Trojans of 777 would be the Trojans of, the intelligence agency, or this empire of bullshit. So that's a good point. Unfortunately, I don't have any numerology skills because I'm not actually an agent. So I don't actually know what 1 stands for. Does it also have a meaning, or is it just a, just a filler? I have no idea. So this is the sort of things you can do, and then you can follow Willow Fine Arts, and you can see, is he maybe just somebody who part-time works as an agent, or is he somebody who's just made a genuinely really funny joke, taking the mickey out of their stupid symbolism, And you can have these thoughts. You don't have to decide. You don't have to arrest a guy, or and please don't, because he maybe can be just just a very insightful guy. But keep running this, and when you see this, don't flip out immediately and say, oh, he must be an agent. Watch it. Keep him on your radar, and essentially make, if you want to really study this, go through and see what people post. People have worked out agent accounts and bot accounts, basically, by, for example, on my Twitter page, I have published, like, Spot the Bot, where literally I could tell that one user must have been a bot, because of the weirdness of the messages, because of the fact that it's referred to freaking space lizards and this crap. So, and then I just published it, Spot the Bot, on my Twitter. If you scroll down, you will find it. And then the account stopped spamming me. Wonderful. Let's get to the next level. So then I'm being spammed by more sophisticated, methods by GCHQ, and it's all part of this brain mapping and what I read and how I react to it and how I think about it. Yes, I can't avoid that when I'm being brain scanned, but it doesn't mean I have to, panic about it. So, hang on. I'm just trying to get to the other, my keyboard is down below, so that's why I'm doing this. So the other thing to do, as now as a contrast of somebody who most very definitely is an agent, in my view, is Robert Chalmers, who commented on exactly the same video, I think. Is that right? Oh no, sorry. He commented on, I think, how to help the victims. Yes, so if you go to the video called, yeah, if you go to the, yeah, oh man, you even replied. That's wonderful. That's priceless. Okay, so this is definitely an agent account as far as I can tell. So go to Robert Chalmers, and he said, crowdfunding, eh, Catherine? Finally, a conclusive reason for the abject nonsense you have been advocating and espousing since the back end of last year. I would caution those watching this to be very, this is capitalized and boldface, very careful about where you choose to invest your hard-earned capital. Ensure you undertake the requisite due diligence and obtain independent financial advice where necessary. My, albeit limited interaction with Catherine, strongly suggests that she may not be who or what she claims to be. Who or what? This compounded with her flat-out refusal to scientifically verify the ostensible attacks against her in a neutral and controlled environment should raise a red flag in the minds of all but the most obtuse among you. Tread very carefully. Your capital may be at risk. Oh my. This is a goldmine of bullshit, and Robert Chalmers, I thank you so very much, because had I wanted to come up with an example of someone, of what an agent of the empire of bullshit sounds like, I couldn't have written a better example than what you have just done. So, what's the problem with this? First of all, my response, right? I said, dear Robert, if you feel that I'm not who I am, why don't you call my old colleges, eh? And ask. I think the video Who I Am with further particulars should flash up at the end of all of my videos. And now I say, you can call St. John's College, Oxford. You can say, was she really a fellow? And I was also an undergraduate at Hartford College, right? That's for sure. So all journalists, you can go and check. That's true. You know, and so much about my further particulars. Yeah, it's true. Second, furthermore, I'm very sorry to tell you that crowdfunding is a total success. It really is. Unlike all other investments, the investor invests himself instead of paying astronomical fees, which I personally call stupidity tax, for advisors who then make a few clicks for the investor via an online portal. And I should add also, let's just have a look at the financial crisis and see how much due diligence those independent financial advisors have actually given investors. So I would say, if you're an investor, get your own shit together and use your own freaking brain, please. Also, the investment is then certified, and so on the crowdfunding, the investment is then certified and can be seen on the site as well as the total sum raised. So the better crowdfunding websites give you the option of leaving a comment, maybe under a pseudonym, so you can see that your sum contributed to the total sum, so you know how much has been donated in total to this cause. You also see, oh sorry, I'm also saying that, also the investment is certified and can be seen on the site as well as the total sum raised. It doesn't get any more transparent than that. The cause is clearly stated and the investor is told what the money is going to be used for exactly. Try finding that out for shared portfolio held with a bank. Oh dear, Robert, you know, I actually worked briefly in finance, but I can tell you've never worked in finance, because otherwise we wouldn't spot that shit. So, and by the way, finance, ooh, she worked in finance. No, I didn't work for a bank. I did a very brief stint for a couple of weeks for a project with an asset management firm, but that's it. So, but, you know, I have studied finance in greatest detail of what's going on. So, number 3, you can see scientific verification. If you look at my videos, hack attack and assaults every 60 seconds, where you can see a scientific high-frequency measuring device showing attacks every 60 seconds. By the way, there are other videos of people using that acousticom, of professionals who then show you how to insulate your home and stuff like that. A detailed explanation of that video is linked below that video. Also, the assaults over Christmas are documented. I think there's a spelling mistake. In fact, you can see a high frequency beam being modulated down into the hertz range, where the brain interference frequencies are set to reside, as I was told. And that is the video where I'm in Germany over Christmas, and literally you can see as I'm scanning this acousticom across my head, on one side it goes doot, 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 on the other side, if I remember correctly, which just goes, you know, shh, like noise, and the doot doot, this kind of tone you hear, the beeping, that is essentially a high frequency signal, because this measuring device only measures between 200 megahertz, so 200 times a million beats per second, up to 8 gigahertz, so 8 billion beats per second, and that's modulated down to a beat that goes doot doot doot, so just a few, or just under a beat per second, and I think that is the range where the brain is, you know, can be interfered with. And then I said, dearest, dearest Robert, based on how much bullshit you have been putting into a single post, I mean, that's quite an achievement, right? I cannot but conclude that you are, in fact, an agent of the empire of bullshit. Nice to meet you. I'm glad you guys are watching my videos too. After all, you have to do the pivot. Best wishes to you and the empire. So, and I made this really long and detailed comment because I want all of you to see just that you can take this bullshit apart. And then Robert Chalmers actually replied, hang on, let's just go through that. He says, nice try, Catherine, but I'm afraid your nonsensical and flippant response will simply not pass muster. I mean, when they put this much effort in, they either have really good AI at GCHQ, you know, and some poor little bastard at the NSA or GCHQ actually was told literally, we want AI, but it has to sound like a total dickhead. Okay, it has to literally perfectly. It has to sound like an agent from our empire, like a total knobhead. Can you program that? And probably this guy was like, okay, yeah, I will do. My God, what am I doing to pay my student fees? So, what does he say? Number one, I'm not questioning who you are as in the university you attended, as I'm sure you're well aware. This detail is of little or no consequence. I am questioning your assertion that you are a victim of the cross-border coordinated efforts of the UK, German and Swiss intelligence agencies. That would seem to me, and indeed anyone gifted with a modicum of common sense, to be extremely unlikely. Oh really? Like Philip Kerr, as in Philip Kerr versus MI5, which you can also find on the High Court, who was, because it is Philip Kerr versus MI5, as his lawyers, you know, quite well put it, and MI5 sent lawyers to defend themselves, so they agreed that, you know, this issue is between Philip Kerr and him. He was hounded from the UK all the way to Thailand. Yeah, so like Thai intelligence was also involved through MI6, I guess. Yeah, and now, what you maybe don't know, Robert Chalmers, is that I was shot in the back of the head straight after hearing entitled, right, Dr. Katherina Horton versus SIS, MI5 and GCHQ. Now, if you get shot in the head in front of your husband, so that you collapse from pain, who could that possibly be? And then, you know, I also got like death threats and stuff like that, and survived an assassination attempt when my husband was again there. And, you know, I also was assaulted in Germany by a helicopter next to German intelligence, as you can probably figure out. It's not going to be a crime cartel that just happens to be doing drug running into Munich, flying over German intelligence, and just on the way, you know, irradiating me because they don't have anything better to do. And given that I with my own eyes saw how German intelligence was training children in front of my house how to gang stalk, that's probably German intelligence. And given that I measured attacks here in my Swiss home, and these are military weapons, and I've now got evidence that it's UK and German intelligence, well, I'm being gang stalked here. I've got videos about gang stalking, you know, when I visited Schaffhausen, for example, and seems to be like the normal standard, you know, how to call it, Ham-Intel network. So that's probably Swiss intelligence, isn't it? So, Robert, I'm very sorry. It's not extremely unlikely. It is extremely likely that if you get put on a watch list by one intelligence agency, it's going to follow you around. So, number two, again, another straw man argument. I'd expect better of a person with your academic background. Very disappointed. I mean, if this is an AI thing, it's really good because, you know, I mean, it's writes very convincingly. If it's an actual person at GCHQ, I mean, poor little shitter, really. But he does write quite articulately. I didn't for 1 minute suggest that crowdfunding can't be a successful endeavor. What I did suggest is that choosing to invest in the manner and on the basis of what you're proposing, more specifically in people whose respective claims have yet to be empirically verified, is perhaps, in all likelihood, a poor decision. Well, Robert, I think if you invest in a company, you also invest in essentially a group of people whose future performance still has to be verified, no? And we kind of have seen how really, really big banks like Goldman Sachs and, you know, others have really cocked up and have used not just the investment of private people, but things like pension funds, you know, companies, and then used it to commit fraud, implode the US economy, implode other economies. So given that we know that high-profile investment has been used for all sorts of fraud that damaged entire pension funds, I think if people start to invest in other people, the damage is limited. Because I really, honestly, Robert, you can hold me to this. If one of the TIs who raises, let's say, 2 grand, with those 2 grand manages to collapse the US economy, I'll be impressed. I'll be like, shit, Robert, you were right. I should have seen that coming, mate. I didn't, sorry. You were right and I was wrong. Honestly, I think that danger doesn't quite arise. However, if you do invest in things like Goldman Sachs and these things, it seems to be not just possible, it seems to be like very likely that's what's going to happen. You know, they're going to invest in like wars and fraud. And, if you're sick of that, why don't you just invest in people who work really hard to uncover crimes against humanity? Just an idea. So, 3, 3, I assume a woman of your formerly scientific standing. Ooh, did I lose my scientific standing? Well, maybe if I lost it, it's probably because of the microwave irradiation. Is not suggesting that the tests undertaken in your bed or spare room in the aforementioned videos are in any way commensurate with those that would be undertaken in an independently supervised control environment, as in a lab. I'll ascribe more credit to you than this. Well, Robert, the thing is, I have been begging people to actually do a survey, for example, like here in Switzerland, the Zivilschutz, like the protection of the, what's it called, the population. However, these people didn't turn up. That's the problem. I'm still on the phone to them, and I'm now trying, again, I called the military police, they passed me on to another organization. Now I've called them, can you please come and do independent scientific measurements and actually tell me what's being irradiated here in my home? And they said, sorry, you have to go back to the canton. Then I called back the military police and I said, look, people seem to be, doing these crimes. Do you have any equipment? And they said, sorry, we can't really investigate and do measurements because we first need to be told by another agency that we should act. And I said, hang on. It seems to be the case that people are using military weapons in private homes and you're the military police. And I said, yeah, but we don't really care about that unless somebody tells us to do something. So that's what I'm up against. I would love to have independent scientific inquiry, but for that, people have to come forward and be willing to do that. I tried to access labs, but people didn't let me. So I'm still working. I know of a lady called Melanie Richan who did, it's actually online, she did testing for implants and so on in a special room that's shielded by a lab, and those videos are also online. But she said to me that she worked a year. She worked a year to be able to use that. So that's what we're up against, Robert. What you can see is the best I can do within my means. And then he finishes off, and then it's also a lot of boldface. He says, then we come to the silly, silly talk about the empire of bullshit. There's a star. Is there anything like, or is a star also like a special intelligence agency symbol because it has appeared? This would be comical if it wasn't so serious. Oh God, you are an agent of the empire of bullshit. Did I just insult your employer? No one else would take this so seriously. May I remind you that you're in a position where you are now asking people to consider parting with their hard-earned cash to support your, what can only be described as outlandish endeavors. You, ergo, have a responsibility to ensure that said people are provided with an adequate and sound basis to make that decision, i.e. proof that you and others are actually being followed and attacked. Flippant, off-the-cuff remarks does them nor you any favours. To anyone watching this, I reiterate, do your due diligence and thoroughly investigate what is being purported to be true here before committing any of your capital. I can say no more to warn you. I hope you say no more, Robert, because this was utter bullshit. First of all, I so far have only said that you should invest in people, and I proposed the idea that people should open crowdfunding websites and actually to help them lift out of their poverty, right? Lift them out of the situation. And I said I would propose that these people make a little YouTube video. You can convince yourself, do you trust them, and you invest in those you trust. The investor, makes up his mind. I would also propose that if an investor, especially investors, come on investors, I ask you, due diligence, right? What due diligence do you do? Do you look over, I don't know, price to earnings ratios, as it has been published by the often cooked books by the company, where professional accountants who basically know every trick in the trade and know how to, brush things under the carpet have made that? What other decisions do you found it on? Their website, what the employees might have said, Don't you have to work really hard to actually get at information like that, who the employees are, who really do a lot of work? Don't you have to pay a lot of money to business intelligence people who are essentially retired spies, or alumni of spying agencies, to then get into the organization if you really want to know detailed stuff? Isn't that the case? And meanwhile, you can invest directly in people, and the one thing you can be sure about is that your money goes to that person. I don't know. I would say, dear investors, of course, do your due diligence, make up your mind, but ask yourself, compare it to how much information are you given by the banks when you're investing in share portfolios through a bank, through an investment advisor. How many fees are branched off? I think for crowdfunding, I think the typical percentage that goes to the crowdfunding website is like 5%, I think. Then also victims can always have the option of just publishing their bank account and say, we would like to receive money directly, and then you don't have the 5% loss. That's also possible. So there are many, many, many things we can work out. However, if you invest directly in people, the one thing you can be sure about is that your money, unless the banks mess it up, or the crowdfunding website, the one thing you can be sure about, it is reaching that particular person. So make up your mind. But otherwise, I would say Robert Chalmers is certainly an agent of the empire of bullshit. And given that he's so keen on due diligence and banky stuff, I would place him squarely in there. But then again, thank you for the really detailed reply, because these sort of examples are utterly priceless. So I've talked enough. This is now in greatest detail the sort of stuff you have to watch out for as we're cycling to better systems and as we're dismantling bullshit. Thank you so much. If you actually listen to this entire video, I'm very impressed. Otherwise, there's always the shortcuts below in the description below the video. Thank you very much. Stay on your guard against bullshit, and any bullshit that you can find is contributing to the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit, wherever you are in the world. This is something that unites us all, from literally from Tokyo over Beijing to, you know, Moscow to Nairobi to St. Petersburg, Johannesburg, name it, right? All the way to New York to Sao Paulo, wherever you go, right? Wherever you are in the world, just ask people, would you like to have a bit more bullshit? And I think people say, no, thank you. Right, we want less, if anything. So this is something we can globally unite behind, and also to fight bullshit and be what I call the anti-bullshit coalition. You don't have to have membership fees. I don't tell you what to do. I just ask you, use your brain, use your independent thought, your independent voice, and help me. Your effort, your work effort, your time, your finances, help me to fight bullshit. Do whatever you can to make our world contain less bullshit. That's all I'm trying to say. If you can help our particular cause, that would be much appreciated, but you can fight bullshit also in other places. That will feed back into our cause. So please, wherever you see it, fight bullshit. Thank you very much for listening.